Hey friends, tonight we begin with something not glamorous but endlessly human, where people went and how they washed. Before we sink in, a tiny favour, only if you truly enjoy these calm, deep dives. Tap like and subscribe so you can find this again when you're sleepy. And in the comments, tell me where you're watching from and what time it is for you. Your city and local time are always fascinating to see. Now dim the lights. Maybe let a small fan hum for that soft background sound. Set your shoulders down. Breathe in. 1, 2. Breathe out. 1, 2. Very good. We'll move slowly and notice the useful, ordinary things. Bricks, drains, warm water, cool stone, and the quiet rules that kept whole cities breathing. Let's begin. You open your eyes to a city that has no hurry. The dawn over the Indus plain is pale and wide, the air still cool, and the bricks beneath your feet steady and uniform. You're in a place where straight streets meet at right angles, and most of the buildings face the lanes with a quiet, practical confidence. The walls are a dull red, the colour of fired clay, and the surfaces are clean because they are meant to be washed. You are in an Indus city, the kind that scholars will later call Harappan, and the most ordinary things, wells, drains and doorways, are what make life work. You walk slowly. A street runs straight, then steps gently downward, the pavement tilted just enough for rainwater to know which way to go. Somewhere, soft footfalls move across rooftops. Somewhere else, a clay jar knocks lightly against a stone rim as water rises from a well. The bricks under your hand feel even, made to a standard so common here that people hardly think about it. That sameness was a promise. If you build with these sizes, everything else fits. Walls align, drains slot in, covers lift and return, floors lie flat. Breathe in, breathe out. The city is teaching you. You with small details. You turn a corner and find a wellhead tucked into the side of a house. It is not a public monument, not a fancy fountain, just a practical piece of daily life, bricked in, a circle of dampness around its mouth where ropes have rubbed smooth paths over years. Someone has left a small wooden dipper on a ledge. The well belongs to the house, and also, in its way, to the lane, because water is both private and public here. In some compounds there are shared wells, in others private ones, but the rule feels the same. Draw water, carry it with care, use it inside, and then send what you do not need into the drains that run beneath your street. Step through a doorway and you feel the shift from lane to home. The threshold rises a little, just enough to stop water and, sometimes, eyes. A small room opens to you. In one corner there is a raised platform, carefully plastered and smooth, with a lip meant to hold water where you need it and guide it away when you are done. This is not a grand bath. It is an ordinary washing place, an indoor convenience you can use at dawn when the city is still. A jar leans against the wall. A small bowl sits inverted to keep dust out. When you pour water here, it loops through a channel hidden in the floor, then into a narrow drain that runs under the street, then onward to soak pits beyond. The technology is simple but thoughtful. Make the surfaces easy to clean, give the water a path, and let gravity do its patient work. You place your palm against the plaster. It is cool. It invites a daily rhythm. Rinse hands and feet, splash the face, calm the mind, begin the day. You imagine the rest of the house stirring, someone heating a small pot, someone folding cloth, someone stepping out to sweep the threshold. The sweep is not ceremony, it is maintenance. You keep dust out. You move debris toward the street where it can be taken away. The city is an agreement among thousands of such little acts. The drains are the city's memory of all these acts, where the water went, what the slope allowed, how the covers were lifted and replaced. You follow the drain with your imagination. Under the lane, flat stones or brick slabs form a cover that can be lifted by a worker's hands. A child can sit on the curb and never know how much flows beneath. Now and then, a manhole, not a word yet, but an opening, a place where a person might reach down with a basket or a scoop to clear silt. The drain is not large, and it was never meant to be a secret river. It is a channel proportioned to daily use. Every house that has a washing platform is an endpoint feeding this common run. Each bend in the drain asks a small question. Will this catch leaves? Is that corner too sharp? Should the cover here be heavier to keep smells down? The city answers in quiet adjustments. A brick added for slope, a slab moved, a patch of plaster renewed. You step back outside. The lane is just wide enough for movement and just narrow enough to feel shaded. Across the way, another doorway opens. Inside you see the same language. Brick, plaster, a small platform for washing, a channel leading away. The sameness is not boring, it is kindness. You will not need to learn a new system every time you visit someone. You will not face a sudden drop where you expected a level surface. If you have to repair a platform, any builder nearby will know where to find bricks that fit. The ratio is common, the technique is shared. This is how cities remain calm. You walk toward a larger street and arrive at a stair that leads down to a remarkable place. Later people will call it a great bath. For you, right now it is a big rectangle that pulls the air cool around it. The steps on either end go down into a pool lined with careful brickwork, the joints sealed and made tight. A ring of rooms frames the edges, not loud, not ornate, just there for changing and storing and waiting. You do not need to know whether this pool is religious, civic, or simply social to feel its quiet rules. You rinse first elsewhere, you enter clean, you keep your voice low, you climb out slowly so others have time to pass. A small inlet brings water in, a small outlet sends it away. Nothing is wasted, everything has a path. Stand by the steps for a moment. The stone leans toward you with a slight grit under your fingers. Steps are proportioned to bare feet, not boots. The lower you go, the cooler it gets, because water keeps its own small climate. Breath in, breath out. The pool is not deep enough to frighten you. It invites long, patient sittings rather than quick plunges. You think of how a place like this anchors a neighbourhood, a spot for washing, for quiet talk, for letting dust settle from the mind. It is not the only place to bathe. The small platforms in homes will do their daily work, but this is where the city breathes together. Walk back into the light. The sun has now tipped past the roofs. You see a pair of workers lifting a drain cover with steady hands. They do not rush. One uses a simple hook, the other braces the slab and nudges it to the side. Under the cover, the channel is darker and wetter, but not chaotic. They scoop small buckets of silt into a basket, one after another, pausing to let water pass. The rhythm is unimportant to anyone who is not standing here, but to the city it is everything. This is what makes the gutters not fill, what keeps the lane from standing water after a storm. In a place of baked clay, dust is as constant as time. The drain is the city's reply to dust. When the workers are done, they set the cover back with the same care they used to lift it. The lane resumes its ordinary face, and it is as if nothing ever happened. You notice doorways set a little above street level. This is another small promise. When water tries to come in, it meets a step that turns it back. If a storm surprises the roof, yes, the lanes tilt their shoulders and let the excess move where it will not harm. You find that you are reading the streets as if they were sentences. This slope says away, that lip says not here. This channel says gentle. A city becomes livable when you can read it with your feet. People pass you without alarm. A woman carries a jar on a hip and pauses to greet someone. A man checks a wall for loose plaster with the side of his hand. A child taps a brick with a pebble, listening for a certain sound that means it is solid. Around a corner, a little room may hold what you do not need to see. A narrow space where a pot sits over a shallow hole, or where a channel accepts waste and urges it outward. You do not linger there. You notice the position, the small vent, the way the door fits snugly to close the smell away. The city expects you to be modest, and so it builds modestly. A good design makes privacy something you do not have to fight for. By midday, heat presses down. The lanes are quieter. A stray breeze pushes warmth along the brick faces, looping around corners, peeking under lintels. Far away, river light winks against the horizon. You feel thirsty and imagine the route a cup of water takes, from wellhead to lip, from lip to wash basin, from basin to floor channel, from channel to street drain, from drain to pit, where solids can settle and water can seep. In the evening, someone will lift the cover and see what the day has left. Nothing here is the work of one person. It is the work of everyone paying attention. Sometimes in a city like this, a well goes brackish, or a drain clogs where 3 houses meet. When that happens, neighbours talk at the threshold. You can picture the careful gestures. This corner needs a new brick. That slab is loose. The slope here is too flat. Someone brings mortar. Someone brings a tool. The repair is small and quick, and no one celebrates it, because the goal is simplicity, to do the modest thing that keeps everything else quiet. It is the kind of civic life that rarely makes a legend, and always makes a city possible. You stand again by the great bath as shadows lengthen. The steps now throw long arrows of shade across the water. A man sits on the upper stair with his feet 2 steps down, cool water lapping his ankles. He does not talk. He dips a small jar, pours it over his hands, rubs them together, then pours again. The repetition is unremarkable and perfect. In a world of dust and sweat and work, the ability to wash without trouble might be the difference between illness and health, discomfort and composure, feeling trapped and feeling free. In this city, washing has been built into the bricks, into the daily walk of a person from door to drain to door again. There are other smells here besides water and clay. You notice something sweet, maybe from a pot of grain boiling somewhere, and something sharper from a kiln, not far away. The kiln's breath feeds the city. More bricks, more uniformity, more repairs that fit into the existing pattern. A city made of improvisations would be lively, but this city is made of agreements, and those agreements allow improvisation in small places without breaking the whole. A new platform can be built with the old ratio. A cracked step can be replaced without making all the other steps wrong. Someone thought about this a long time ago and shared the knowledge. You are living on that thought. At dusk, the lane gathers its last water for the day. A child runs a little, then slows when the parent calls. A dog wanders to the shade. Two women trade a handful of dates for a bowl of something warm. Somewhere, a soft song rises and falls, not to entertain the street, but to keep a rhythm for hands at work. You notice that the drain does not complain, it simply does its job. The covers are strong enough to carry the day's steps and thin enough that a pair of workers can lift them. The joints are tight, the gradient is steady. These are dull phrases, and they are tas, or the backbone of comfort. You start to count small, repeating things that hold this place together. The way steps are the same height from house to house. The way thresholds rise just so. The way water always finds a way onward. The way light falls into certain rooms and stays out of others. The way every surface that meets water is smoothed and sealed. This is not the history of heroes, but it is the history of rest. If the drains failed, the city would too. If water were hard to draw, the days would tilt toward exhaustion. By making washing easy, the city frees energy for everything else. Night thickens. Oil lamps mark doorways like small, calm eyes. You think ahead to the work this city requires. Scooping silt, checking covers, renewing plaster, sharing wells, agreeing on where to send waste, deciding which lane gets washed first after a storm. None of this will appear in a poem, but all of it makes sleep possible. You run your fingertips along a brick edge and feel the slight roundness where thousands of hands have done the same. That curve is the city's memory of attention. You walk one more time past the well. A last jar of water is being drawn. The rope makes a sound like a gentle violin, not music, but a soft friction that says, "Enough for tonight." The jar will tip over the washing platform, a floor will be rinsed, a small channel will carry the rest away. The drain under the street will accept it without comment because it was built for this. Not much, not little, just what a house needs when a day ends. You realise that the true measure of a city may be how well it handles the unremarkable, the wash that makes sleep more comfortable, the waste that does not linger, the water that returns tomorrow where you expect it. You pause at the corner and look back down the lane. The line of bricks glows faintly, catching lamplight and letting it go. You listen for trouble and hear none. What you hear instead is the steady, almost breathing hush of a place that has aligned itself with gravity and common sense. You think of cities you have known, messy, gloria, loud, and feel a quiet respect for this one's firm humility. It does not invite you to marvel, it invites you to notice. In that act of noticing, you understand how many lives are knit together by drains underfoot and wells at hand, by platforms that slope just so, by covers that lift and return, by slopes that say, "this way." And as you stand there, dusk folding into night, a question forms and lingers like cool air over the bathing pool. Who kept all of this working day after day? And how did they organise the silent, constant labour that made an entire city feel so effortlessly clean? With a question cooling in the evening air, who kept all of this working day after day? Who organised the quiet labour that made a city feel effortlessly clean? Tonight you return to the same straight lanes and even bricks, and you try to notice not only the drains and wells but the people who moved them from idea to habit. You begin at first light when the city's roofs still hold a soft chill. A man steps into the lane with a short broom of stiff twigs and a basket that fits against his hip. His movement is patient. He sweeps dust toward the gutter, not in great clouds but in small, careful fans as if he were combing a long braid. Another person follows, lifting a flat brick cover with a hooked stick. There is no show of strength. The cover is proportioned to be lifted by a worker, set down with a dull note, lifted again next week and the week after. Hands learn these weights. Joints learn these angles. The lane's edge becomes smooth because palms and fingers and the flat of a forearm have pressed there thousands of times, checking fit, checking slope, checking whether water will still go where it should when rain surprises the roof. You move with them in your mind. A shallow basket dips, fills with silt the colour of old tea, rises and tips into a larger tub on a handcart. The Germ. Arut's wheel is a familiar sound, a gentle roll over baked clay. A child watches from a threshold, and an older woman nudges the child back, not unkindly, just to keep the work clear. This is not a spectacle. This is a city keeping its face clean. If a drain is a sentence, these people are the breath between the words, the pause that keeps speech from tripping over itself. Not far away, in the grey cool before sunrise takes control, you see a kiln's outline and smell a faint, dry heat. Here, brickmakers begin their day. They scoop clay from a pit that looks unimpressive to anyone who does not live by its rhythm. The clay is mixed, pressed into moulds, shaken free, and set to dry. The moulds are not guesses. They obey a ratio that repeats so often it becomes invisible. Bricks that nest neatly, stack predictably, and split a wall or a floor at clean intervals. You touch one drying brick with the back of your hand. It is warm already, as if it remembers the sun. Later, the kiln will harden it to a steady red that can shrug off water when the lane is rinsed. You trace the line from kiln to wall. A brick laid true becomes a floor that holds a washing platform. A floor with a gentle fall becomes a channel that gives water a path. A series of channels become a lane-level drain. The drain becomes the city's quiet promise to its people. We have thought about the water. And all along that line are hands. The maker's hands, the builder's hands, the cleaner's hands, the householder's hands, tipping a jar on a plastered slab each morning to send a small wave down to the street. Not all water begins in a well, but here many, many days do. You step toward a ring of brick that looks simple and solves something profound. A well is as social as it is domestic, sometimes inside a house wall, sometimes shared between neighbours. The rope leaves a shine where it rubs at the lip. A wooden tripod may creak, or a single post may lean into the work. The bucket rises dark and dripping, and someone's palms widen to meet it. You notice again the lack of drama. No great lifting machines shout for attention. The well is sized for bodies, and bodies are strong enough for it when they return day after day, year after year, generation after generation. The same rope marks repeat, the same bricks wear in the same places, the same kind of jar bumps the same ledge. The family changes, the practice persists. Think of the well digger, somewhere on the edge of the city where new houses press into dust. A circle is set out, an old channel is avoided, a test pit tells whether the ground will hold its shape. Bricks are lowered and laid in a ring upon a ring, like a quiet red telescope pointed down into the earth. The digger knows how far to go, when to brace, how to keep the wall true. He also knows the limits of the city's thirst. A deeper well is not always a kinder one. Sometimes the right depth is the steady depth, where replenishment keeps pace with need. You imagine his hands, raw from grit. You imagine the way he teaches an apprentice to listen to the ground. Now follow the water out again. Inside each home, a washing platform, simple, plastered, with a lip, lets water gather where you need it and then go. Some houses include a narrow vented space where a person can sit or squat over a small opening, often connected by a vertical chute to an outside pit or a covered channel. These are not places for ceremony. They are private because privacy is gentler, a screen of brick, a door that meets its frame without fuss, a vent that asks smells to leave quietly. This is the architecture of consideration. The heart of it is not invention, but attention. The slope is enough, the plaster is smooth, the cover is tight, the path is short. You can almost hear the rules without anyone speaking. Rinse first, keep the platform clean, send water onward, close the door softly. Beyond the house, neighbours meet at the edges of their responsibilities, the corner where three draitoisan. Inns feed one, the step where the lane takes a shallow dip, the place where rainwater sometimes lingers after the first storm of the season. They talk in practical sentences. That brick is loose. The slab has cracked. The drain turns too fast here. Small solutions are carried from house to house. A man has a mould for a replacement cover. A woman knows a plaster mix that resists a certain kind of stain. Children learn to lift a cover and set it down without pinching fingers, because no one wants the clang that frightens a sleeping baby. You keep walking, and the city keeps showing you the same mind in many small forms. Weights of dark stone, polished to neat cubes and cones, measures that repeat in shops, scales that balance when both sides agree. If a builder buys bricks, he knows what 100 will be, size, weight and edge. If a potter buys clay, he knows how much water to add because his hand has been taught by older hands. If a cleaner is paid to empty a soak pit, the measure by which he is paid is not guessed. The city's fairness is a quiet foundation for its cleanliness. The person who dips a basket into the drain and lifts sludge does not need a speech. He needs the assurance that the weight he lifts will be understood by the person who pays him. You notice seals, small, carved stones with animals and marks. They are the city's habit of leaving a neat signature on things that move, jars, bales, bundles. You are careful here, because the script is a closed door to you and to many others. Its meanings are not yours to claim. Still, the presence of marks suggests pattern and memory. This came from there, this belonged to that. This quantity matched that promise. In a place where drains work and wells do not run dry too quickly, trust rides along with water. At the scale of the whole city, you see larger patterns that cannot be held in your hand. There is often a raised mound, call it a citadel if you like, though it is not a fortress the way later ages will build them, and a lower town fanning out with streets that cross at right angles. Certain quarters may have workshops, others rows of homes with courtyards. What you do not see is as striking as what you do. No great palaces that shout someone's name, no giant statues to a single ruler, no grand tombs boasting of a person who commanded drains like rivers. The city's ego seems small, its competence large. The work feels distributed, houses that maintain themselves, lanes that feed larger channels that end in places meant to receive what they carry. You are left to imagine an administration that is there because so many small parts cohere, rather than because one person's face is stamped on every brick. Floods come, of course. The Indus and its many arms copy the sky, sometimes generous, sometimes fierce. You imagine a season when water rises too quickly and leaves silt in every hollow. The city's replies are practical and layered. Streets are cleared, drains are opened, thresholds are raised a little when the chance arrives. In some places you can see building upon building, levels that tell of long years of living in one place. A wall is rebuilt on the old line but higher. A slope is adjusted because last year's storm taught a hard lesson. The people who do this are not poets and not generals. They are stewards. They keep score in brick and plaster and slope and cover. You pause at a corner where a lane meets a broader street. There, a man with a round basket moves like a metronome. Scoop, lift, tip, step. He wears a cloth that keeps splashes off his skin. He says a few words to the person who brings him water to rinse his hands. The two do not argue. They know that a city that quarrels over small maintenance will drown in its own reluctance. You glimpse an organisation that might be a guild, or a neighbourhood committee, or a foreman who reports to someone with a clay tablet and a list. The form does not matter as much as the habit. Drains are open. D on market day. Wells are checked after storms. Soak pits are emptied before the hot months when smells can spoil tempers. You step inside a house you did not see before. Its courtyard has a small tree that throws speckled shade on a floor swept clean. In the corner, the familiar plastered platform holds a water jar, a ladle, and a round stone that is smooth from years of careful hands. A young person rinses the floor with a half jar of water and a patient arm. The water knows the way. Lip, channel, drain, away. You discover that a householder's best tool is not a clever invention, but attention. Notice the places where water lingers and smooth them. Notice the smallest crack at a drain mouth and seal it. Notice the way the door meets the jamb and plane the wood a little so the line is snug. A tight line is a calm night. Wander again to the great bath, that rectangle of quiet. Today, workers renew the seal between bricks with a fine, careful layer. One kneels in water, up to his knees, and presses the material with the heel of his hand, not too hard, not too soft, the way you might comfort a child. Another lifts a jar and drips water where the first asks for it. A third sits on the steps and checks a basket of tools, turning each one so the handles dry evenly and do not warp. None of them look proud, they look steady. The pool will be ready for whatever ceremony or simple washing it serves. You feel, very gently, that the city holds public and private together by insisting both be clean. At the edge of town, you find a place where refuse is gathered. It is not a heap of wreckage, it is the tail end of a process. Straw is sorted from shard, ash from ash. What can return to the earth is spread where it will do the least harm and sometimes the most good. What can be used again? Broken pots made into fill, worn bricks made into levelling courses, weights in stacks. If something smells, it is downwind. If something rots, it is given a place to finish its work. You think of other cities that would prefer not to see their endings, but this city makes endings part of the same, calm routine as beginnings. A pot begins at a wheel, it ends as a clean fragment laid into a floor to keep it dry. You begin to notice the professions that make this network hum. Rope makers twist fibres into lines that do not bite the hands too badly when wet. Carpenters shave lids so they settle tight. Potters turn jars with a lip that pours a steady stream. Metalworkers hammer hooks that lift covers without cracking them. Kiln workers learn the exact colour that means strong enough to lie under a lane. Sweepers walk at dawn. Water carriers walk at dusk. Everyone's path intersects at the drain under the lane in the wash of a small platform, at the well where rope marks gloss a brick rim. And yet, for all these lives, your knowledge slips on the surface of a mystery. You do not know the name of the person who first decided a city should be a grid, because the script that might carry that name is not yet understood. You do not know whether the rules came from a council in a quiet room or from a habit that spread because it worked better than any alternative. You do not know how disputes were settled when a new house's drain met an old lane at the wrong angle. You only know that the angle you see today is right, that the water runs where it should, that someone somewhere thought about this, argued perhaps, compromised, experimented, learned, and then taught the answer to a neighbour. Stop for a moment by a threshold you have passed a dozen times. Look at the slight rise, the thin line of smooth plaster, the polished curve where many hands have brushed away a little dust each day. That curve is the real signature of the city, not an inscription, but a habit. You hear it in the quiet clack of a jar set gently on a ledge. You see it in the even cuts of a brick, broken true with a single strike. You smell it in the air that does not surprise you with rot when the sun grows. Strong, the city's greatness is this: ordinary people, repeating ordinary acts with uncommon consistency. As dusk comes again, the lane looks no different to a hurried eye than it did yesterday. But you now carry a map of hands in your mind: the cleaner, the well digger, the brickmaker, the seal cutter, the carpenter, the potter, the rope maker, the plasterer, the worker who kneels in water to renew a seam, the child who learns to lower a cover without a clang. Somewhere, in a room with a breeze and a lamp, a person counts, weights, hours, baskets, so that the people who lift do not carry more than their share. Somewhere else, an older person sits on a stoop and reminds a younger one which way the water needs to turn at that tricky corner after the first big rain. You return to your first question and realise it has multiplied into many small ones. Who kept the calendar of cleaning? Who decided when a street should be raised a brick height to cope with new floods? Who trained the workers to press the ceiling paste along the bath's joints just so? Who measured the slope that made water feel invited but not rushed? And behind all these, how did a city with no trumpeting palaces and no famous general's tomb coordinate such unglamorous excellence for so long? You return once more to the lanes and roofs of an Indus city, where the day begins with the lightest of chores and ends with water finding its way home. You remember the questions from last time, about the hands that kept the calm alive, and tonight you let the story come to its close, how this order held for so long, how it thinned, and what it still whispers to you each time your own tap sighs or your drain gives that small, satisfied swallow. Breathe in, 1, 2. Breathe out, 1, 2. You step into morning. The routine looks the same as it did yesterday. A broom grazes a threshold. A jar tilts over a plastered washing floor. A worker pauses at a street opening and slides a cover aside with a practiced half-turn of the wrist. Underneath, the city's shallow vein carries the night's last washings forward. You look more closely now and see the details that keep a system honest. The slight crown in the middle of a street so water chooses the gutters. The way lintels sit 3 finger widths higher than the lane so stormwater hesitates before a door. The inspection holes set at intervals, just large enough for an arm, just small enough to keep wandering feet from trouble. House by house, the architecture states its purpose without fuss. A modest room devoted to washing, a vented corner for what must be private, a short run of channel to the open air, a closed run beneath the walkway, a soak pit where solids wait to be lifted, and beyond, the long, low places at the edge of town where the last of the water arrives and recedes. The bricks that touch water are baked hard. The bricks that simply frame space may be sun-dried. Floors that meet water are butter smooth with plaster, and a little slope you only notice when a puddle glides away from your toes. This is engineering behind a quiet face, and the more you notice it, the more you feel the kindness of predictability. You wander to where the city keeps its formal water, reservoirs and steps, and that large, steady pool you now think of as a public promise. In other places across this civilization, you would see vast tanks cut and faced to gather monsoon rain, channels that catch a storm's impatience and coach it into storage. Here too, order meets season. A small sluice answers heavy clouds. A spillway spares a wall from pride. No one thanks the builder aloud. Instead, the builder's decisions collect their thanks in the unremarkable fact that the steps are still sound when children come to sit on them at dusk. And yet, nothing in a human world is simply static. Even a well-laid drain will ask for renewal. A plastered lip will crack where sun and shadow argue every afternoon. A brick near a corner will shift a little under the warehouse. 8 of 1,000 steps and the tug of occasional floods. The beauty of this system is not that it avoids decay, but that it expects it and offers a simple cure. A cover lifts without drama. A joint is resealed with familiar stuff. A platform is skimmed and smoothed with the same movement an apprentice learned by watching an older hand. The city treats repair as a form of routine courtesy, not as defeat. That is the thing you notice most. Maintenance is identity. You try to see for the last time the broader shape of life, a grid that fits bodies and carts. neighbourhoods that repeat the same common-sense plan, workshops whose waste is kept away from wells, drains that step down, down, down toward places that can accept their burden. You imagine a merchant marking a jar with a small seal that says, in its own compact script, "This is mine, this has this weight," and the jar travelling across town and back without confusion because everyone recognises the proportion of the bricks, the rhythm of the steps, the grammar of the drains. Order multiplies trust. Trust reduces friction. Reduced friction frees hours for everything else. When you let years roll by like carts, you find out how success changes a place. More houses lean into a lane, more roofs intersect, the city grows heavier with its own momentum. If the drains are widened when they need to be, growth remains gentle. If not, the gutters start to complain after high rains. You picture a season when the monsoon arrives late, then all at once, and the gutters fill beyond their dignity. The inspection covers come up. Baskets work double. Tempers pinch, then recover. It is in such moments that you feel administration most strongly, not in a single ruler's voice, but in the simple fact that someone somewhere knows who will be paid to lift the silt on market day and who will bring the extra hooks when a slab cracks across its width. Your attention wanders outward, beyond a single city, and you consider the larger world that touched these bricks. Boats riding low with grain and cotton, beads of carnelian that took Polish in one town and found necks in another. A word for this civilization on foreign lips, meluha, perhaps, an echo of your steady lanes in the ledger of a distant port. Trade moves with water and water shapes cities. When rivers prosper, plans thrive. When rivers shift their minds, plans must chase or thin. You think of channels that went where they no longer go, of a water table that rose and fell in patterns you can only guess from soil and silt. You do not force the story into a single cause. You let multiple pressures lean on the door: climate, river, trade, soil, politics across horizons you cannot see. In your slow walk you pass a large well, and here you discover a kind of time mark. At the lip you see not just one polished arc from rope, but several faintly overlapping, paths of lifting etched by generations. The older arcs sit lower, the newer arcs sit a little higher, as if over decades the city raised its floors against floods, and the wellhead rose with them. Layer upon layer, like pages of a book, the settlement lifted itself to find dry footing. That is the optimism of builders who expect to stay. But there comes a time when a city raises itself so often that the cost of lifting the base of everything begins to wear on the people who must climb the last two fingers of a step with aching knees and a heavy jar. It is evening. The air holds that quiet cinnamon of dust settled by water. You imagine a long era nearing its close. Fewer workers arrive to lift covers after storms. A corner drain stones itself with silt and stays that way longer than it should. A well's rope marks deepen, then fall out of use as families move to newer streets or smaller hamlets where the work of keeping water obedient feels more personal again. You do not call this collapse, you call it thinning. Big organisations loosen to become little ones. A million small decisions where to build, when to repair, whether to stay, tilt gradually toward elsewhere. You stop at a house like the one you entered on the first day. The washing floor still waits in the corner. The plaster lip is chipped but competent. The little channel is capable. A jar sits where it always sat. For a while yet, this room will do what it was made to do. The end of a civilization does not look like a door slammed. It looks like routine maintained by fewer hands until those hands quietly pack their basin and go. The drain under the lane carries one more rinse, and then one day, after a rain, it carries the silt of an empty house. No one is there to lift the slab. You walk out to the edge of town and watch the last light over fields where the river's moods have always mattered more than anyone's titles. Beyond the horizon, other places carry on with other solutions. Stone seats with a view of the wind at a castle's wall, long rows of shared benches above a channel of water in a coastal empire, hot rooms with starry glass and ladles on warm stone, wooden baths where rules are stated on clean boards in careful script. The Indus answer: private bathing floors, household drains, standardised bricks, a public pool lined to keep its promise, joins a long conversation humans have with water and waste, how to invite the one and politely send the other away. Now look with your own eyes at your own era. pipes inside walls, traps that keep smells where they belong, valves that open with a quarter turn and close without complaint, a meter that counts invisibly in a cabinet no one admires, a wastewater plant outside the city where microbes and air and gravity perform a choreography you never see. If these things are invisible to you, it is because they are working. The Indus world would understand that logic perfectly. The way your life hides its most necessary machines is not contempt for them, it is gratitude expressed as routine. You remember how little ego you found in those lanes. No giant statue told you whom to thank for a drain that runs. No bragging inscription announced who first measured a slope. That humility may be the most valuable thing the story leaves with you. When a system does not centre itself on a single face, it can be tended by anyone who learns the craft. When standards are shared, brick sizes, cover weights, slopes, the distance between inspection points, any hand that cares can enter the work. Standards make anonymous competence possible, and anonymous competence is the true luxury if you want to sleep. You listen, in your mind, for the sounds that mean a city is healthy. They are not the drums of festivals, though those are welcome, nor the clatter of markets, though those feed families. They are the small sounds at dawn, a broom's hush, a jar's brief hollow knock on a ledge, the leathery slide of a rope across brick, the patient scrape of a cover, the low spill of water in a channel that actually goes downhill. You could record such a dawn and play it in a dark room as you fall asleep. It is the music of nothing going wrong. Let the years accelerate one more time. New languages arrive, old signs go unanswered, the grid loosens, wells go silent, the bricks sleep in place. Some are reused wherever people settle again, some stay where hands set them and become a faint pattern in the earth. When later travellers cut trenches through these mounds, what wakes them most is not gold, not proclamation, not even fine sculpture, but order. Right angles that resist forgetting, drains that hold their line even when filled with centuries of dust, stairs whose treads know the length of a human foot that has not changed. From such modest evidence a whole temperament emerges, the confidence that ordinary life deserves design. And so the story closes where it began, in a room that gathers water for you in a small pool and gives it back to the earth cleanly, without spectacle. You place your hand on the plaster and feel coolness that belongs to Nen. one and to everyone. You know that the work of keeping this coolness in the walls required a society that believed in repeated, unglamorous acts, sealing joints, lifting covers, smoothing lips, measuring slopes, paying for baskets of silt by fair weights, training new hands before old ones grew tired. You know too that this belief can thin if the river moves, if the air dries, if trade turns in a new direction. But the habit remains ready wherever people decide to live together without harming each other with their own water. You stand at the lane's mouth, the city's edge behind you, and the modern night before you. Somewhere in your building, pipes tick softly as they cool. Somewhere on your street, a maintenance crew opens a cover nobody notices at noon. Somewhere at the city's rim, water breathes through basins where gravity still works for free. You share a lineage with the people who learned to make a floor lean just right. Breathe in, 1, 2. Breathe out, 1, 2. When you turn off your light, you will have a new respect for the quietest part of your home. You will know that a civilization can be measured not only by what it celebrates, but by what it maintains without applause. And perhaps tomorrow, when you hear your own drain whisper, you will pause on the threshold and ask yourself a small, restful question. What would it look like if our cities honoured maintenance with the same calm pride the Indus once set in brick? Would our sleep be steadier and our days a little kinder if we learned to love the boring work that keeps water in its place? Listen slowly. Breathe in, 1, 2. Breathe out, 1, 2. Tonight you walk beside the first long cities of rivers, between the Euphrates and the Tigris, where mud becomes brick, bitumen becomes glue, and water is both a blessing and a worry that never stops asking to be guided. You do not rush. You notice the big bath of Mesopotamia, the river, the canals, the temple basins, and you notice the little rooms as well, household corners with a drain, quiet courtyards with a jar and a ledge, narrow brick. Lined chutes that make private things leave politely. The great waters and the small waters together make a city. You begin at dawn in a place like or Uruk when the light is pale and the roofs are flat. The city smells faintly of wet clay, fresh reed and the sharp, dark sweetness of bitumen, the black stuff dug from the ground along certain banks and carried in lumps to mend seams. Streets are not straight in the Roman sense. They bend and taper with the shape of blocks, but they know their slope. You feel it under your feet, a soft fall toward a gutter, a habit of water to move away from thresholds. If you drag your sandal along the edge where wall meets lane, you feel a line that has been smoothed 1,000 times by brooms before breakfast. A woman opens her door inward. Most doors open inward here into a courtyard because the house is meant to look at itself, not at the street. The courtyard is the heart, a patch of sky, a rectangle of light that changes hour by hour. In one corner is the first of the little rooms, though it is really a space within a space. A plastered floor with a low curb, a jar, a broad bowl, a short lip that invites water to gather and then depart. The floor is not dramatic, that is the point. It is made to be rinsed every day without thought. The plaster is fine, renewed each season, sometimes with powdered clay and straw, sometimes with a little lime if a builder can afford it. The water you pour here does not stay to become a nuisance. It finds a narrow channel, hidden in the wall's foot or cut into the floor's edge, and moves into a small drain that ties the house to the lane. You have seen similar things in other old cities, but here the materials speak differently. Stone is rare in the south, mud brick is common, sun-dried brick makes walls, baked brick makes places that must touch water over and over again, steps, thresholds, the bottoms of drains, the little lips that keep puddles from returning into rooms. Baked brick is harder, redder, and it takes bitumen like a patient friend, the seams pressed with dark pitch that resists seepage. You pass your fingers along an exposed joint and feel a faint tackiness that never goes fully away in the heat. Nothing flashy, only a technology of small certainties. This channel will not leak into that neighbour's wall. This seam will hold through the wet month. This floor will clean with 2 bowls instead of 3. Step out to the lane and follow the water's path. Where 2 houses meet, thin gutters join like fingers. A boy lifts a removable cover, a fired brick slab with 2 small holes for a hook, and peers into the shallow void beneath. The smell is not pleasant, but it is managed. A man with a short-handled scoop comes along, empties silt into a woven basket, and tips it into a barrow to be carried to the dump beyond the walls where old shards and broken brick are sorted for reuse. The cover drops back into its rebate with a soft, rubbery note, the sound of bitumen settling. This is a sound you will hear again and again. It is the note of a city that builds for water to pass. Keep walking. Ahead, a canal glides with brown weight, carrying barley, reeds, and the city's future. Its banks are built, not raw, revetments of brick set with care and caulked where needed. At intervals you find steps, broad, shallow, meant for bare feet and jar-lifting hands. Women stand knee-deep and wash cloth. A man shaves with a copper blade, dipping it in a bowl, flicking it out, dipping again. There are rules here, not written for you to see, but strong. Wash upstream. Fetch water from this stair and not that one. Keep the animals away from the best landing. The canal is a public bathhouse without roof or wall. The wind is your roof, the sun your heater. It is not private, but it is honest. Now your path bends toward a temple district. You pass storerooms with clay jar stoppers sealed by little lumps bearing animals and marks, cuneiform signs pressed with a reed stylus. The wedge-line script that makes clay talk. Inside a courtyard, a basin sits on a raised plinth. It is wide and shallow, with a channel that trickles to a set of jars arranged below. Here, water is not only for dust and sweat, it is for things a city calls clean or unclean in the company of its gods. Priests bathe before they approach a statue, wash hands, rinse mouths, sprinkle doors. In a world of sun and dust, to wash is to reset. The basin's edges are worn smooth. You picture the long line of mornings when a novice filled it with jars from a well, poured them all, skimmed dust from the surface, and made the stone shine. The words for this work are not poetry, they are order. Some texts speak of mixtures, oils and alkali ash, beaten together into a soap-like paste. The city uses such things for cloth, for freeing grease from wool, and likely for skin when the work is heavy and the day is long. In a small room off a courtyard, a woman rubs a cloth with something that smells faintly bitter and clean. She scrubs, rinses, wrings, and spreads the cloth on a line to drink the light. No chorus greets this work, yet if it stops, the city's shoulders sag. Clean cloth against skin is a small happiness that keeps tempers cooler when heat arrives. The little rooms of waste are quieter still. In some houses, a corner is built around a vertical shaft, brick-lined, stiff as a well turned upside down. A seat of wood or fired clay may rest above the opening. In humbler rooms, the method is a squat on a small, smooth platform with a drain leading to that shaft. The shaft drops to a cesspit you do not need to see. Now and then a worker opens a low hatch, scoops what must be removed, and carts it away before the heat of noon deepens the smell. The work is not named in an epic. It is paid in measures, often in barley, sometimes in silver weight. The worker knows exactly how high to fill. His basket before it is too heavy for the shoulders that must rise with it. The city speaks through that unspoken math. Enough to be fair, not enough to break the back. You crouch to look at a floor where water meets brick. There is a secret here, one you only notice when a builder points with a trowel. Floors that must be washed slope a finger width toward a corner. The curve is so gentle that an untrained eye misses it. That curve is the city's patience made physical. It means a woman can pour a bowl, sweep twice, and have the last trickle reach the notch that leads to the lane. No puddle to feed flies, no damp patch to rot a beam, no standing water nesting under a jar. Multiply that curve by 1,000 rooms, and you have a city that does not stink at noon. You pause in a workshop where clay drains are shaped by hand around a wooden form, then fired in a kiln that breathes like a sleeping animal. The pipes are short, slightly flared at one end to fit the next, simple sleeves that make a line. Their insides are smoother than the outsides because water likes a smooth road. A young worker runs her fingers along a pipe's lip, knocks a tiny burr away with a chip of pottery, and sets the piece on a stack. She will never be praised for that knock, but the pipe she made will carry a family's day without a bubble that catches lint. Think of bitumen again. In places where channels meet, a hand has pressed pitch into the joint, warmed it, and pressed again until no light peeks through. The smell is like tar and salt and smoke, and it hangs on the skin. Without it, seams weep. With it, the city stays dry where it must be dry. Bitumen binds ship planks, seals baskets that carry water, fixes bricks where water snarls and tries to back up. On a hot day you can score it with your nail. On a cold morning it is stubborn as a god. This is Mesopotamian kindness, messy, exact, and everywhere. At the scale of neighbourhoods, canals do more than bring water. They set rhythms. Irrigation channels invite farmers to plan the week. Open the gate on the second day, flood this field, close. By evening, let the water slide to the next plot. In town, smaller ditches take runoff to larger ones. There are keepers for these, men with keys to wooden sluices, men with lists of whose turn is when. They are not glamorous jobs. They involve mud, complaints, and the long memory of who cheated last season. But without them, a street becomes a stream, and the courtyard floor turns to soup. The city's peace lives in those keys. The big bath, the river, has its own little technologies. Reeds are bundled and tied to make mats that keep banks from fraying. A threshold of fired brick is set where jars bite the edge most often. A low curb meets the dust at the top of the steps so wind-blown silt stops there instead of running into the landing. A boy sweeps the landing with fast, efficient strokes. Someone pays him in dates and a few copper bits, not out of charity but because everyone knows a clean landing means faster work for all who come with jars after him. You think of sickness because water always carries that thought beside it. There are tablets that mention ills with names that feel like weather reports. Fevers, belly troubles, skin blemishes that can spread when heat is high. Priests and healers prescribe washes, poultices, fumigations, prayers. Boiling is known, sun is used as a healer. There is no germ theory, but there is experience. When a canal is low and still, wise people fetch from a fresher branch. When a ditch smells wrong, they block it, scrape it, and open a new line. Some rituals may look superstitious to you. Some are good hygiene in a language of offerings and incense. Both reduce harm, and harm reduced is the point. You pass a market where sellers sprinkle a stall's floor to press the dust down. The water they toss is not waste. It is a tool that turns grit into a quiet crust for a few hours. At sunset, the same stall keepers will rinse the corners brilliant. Ush toward the gutter, lift a slab to let the edge flow. The market smells of onions, sesame, damp wood, and people. It does not reek. That is the achievement. Not perfume, merely not terrible. Cities that are not terrible by noon are cities that will live to see evening. Now come back to the house with the inward-looking courtyard. A child spends time today filling a jar from the neighbourhood well. Wells here are lined with baked brick and often ringed with wood to protect the lip. A rope has polished a groove. Hands have worn it smooth. You notice the distance from the well to the door to the washing corner, from that corner's lip to the little channel that leads away. The distances are short enough to be kind to shoulders and backs. A city of long distances for heavy things is a city that wastes people. A city of short distances for heavy things is a city that keeps its people possible. Your eyes lift over the wall. Up on the roof, someone has set a shallow basin to warm in the sun. Evening bathing becomes gentler when water has seen an hour of light. Roofs are rooms here, cool beds on hot nights, workspaces for drying grain, quiet places for washing with a little privacy if a screen of reed stands at the parapet. You picture the rhythm. Draw water in the morning, reserve a jar for the roof, leave it to warm, carry it to the washing corner as the light softens, rinse the day out of hair and hands, send the tired water down a channel that knows the way. You hear a story without words, an apprentice learning to set a drain in a doorway. Not in the centre, never in the centre where feet fall, but to the side, where it can do its job without catching heels. The apprentice places the first pipe, checks the fall with a wetted string. If the string stays damp, the slope is too shallow. Adds a wafer of clay under one lip, tries again. The master says little. The string runs dark and then slowly clears, pulling a tiny bead downhill. That bead is a future without smell. The master nods. The joint is sealed with bitumen. A thin smear of lime plaster smooths the last ridge. Later, a passerby will walk through the door and never know that 2 hours of care held the city steady. At times you sense the palace in all this, and the temple, and the households that keep the day-to-day. Palaces demand water for kitchens and courts. Temples demand it for purity. Households demand it because skin and cloth and jars and floors all want a rinse. The palaces may order canals dredged. The temples may keep basins filled. The households may maintain the drains that touch their thresholds. Everyone shares the banks and the big water. Everyone owns the little rooms. Balance is not a meeting, it is a habit. It grows dark. Lamps mark doorways. Along the canal, a last pair of figures climb wet steps and tip bowls from ankle to calf to knee, slow and practiced. An old man sits on a low stool in a lane and uses a thin stream from a jar to wash his hands, then his face. He sips the last mouthful. He does not waste a drop. He flicks his fingers and watches the drops find the gutter. When they reach it, they know where to go. You turn, and the temple's basin is a dark eye, not seeing, only holding a little of the sky. In houses, small drains whisper. In a workshop, pipes cool and wait to be carried to a site where a doorway will learn not to puddle. Out by the dump, a cart tips its load and a man with a rake moves the heap so air can work. The city is not beautiful in the heroic way. It is beautiful in the way a well-made jar is beautiful. It holds, it pours, it does not crack if you treat it with respect. Breathe in. 1, 2. Breathe out. 1, 2. You have met the great bath of this land, the river and the canals, and the little rooms, the corners with drains, the shafts that carry waste, the basins that calm cloth and skin. You have felt the fingers of bitumen in seams, the slope under a floor, the slight crown of a street that sends water to two. He sides. You have watched people do ordinary things with steady skill. You have not yet asked the hardest question, when the river gives too much or too little, when silt swallows channels or kings. Change gates and canals. How does a city like this keep its waters obedient? And who decides, in the quiet before dawn, which sluice opens and which closes? Breathe in. 1, 2. Breathe out. 1, 2. You left section 1 at the edge of a question. When water is both helper and troublemaker, who tells it where to go? Tonight you walk the same crooked lanes and roof lines, but you look for people with keys, to gates, to jars, to habits, and for the quiet paperwork that lets a river city stay calm. You begin at a door you have passed before. It opens into a courtyard with light flattened against a wall. On a low bench lies a tablet still damp, with the clean wedge marks of a stylus pressed in rows. A scribe copied numbers before breakfast. Baskets of silt lifted from a drain, half-days owed for canal clearing, jars issued to the temple basin, rations of barley to the men who carried bitumen. You do not read the script, but you read the scene. The tablet sits next to a little clay cone the scribe will use to seal a string around a bundle. A boy will carry both tablet and bundle along a lane, and at the corner he will lift his chin so the seal and the record are easily seen. The city runs on seeing and agreeing. You step out and follow the boy. He turns at the smell of bitumen and stops where two men kneel beside a joint. They warm the pitch over a small brazier and press it into the seam where a baked brick drain meets a vertical chute. The scribe's tablet is not for them. They work on a different list, held in a different hand. Their supervisor checks with a fingertip, pushing gently along the seam to feel for gaps that eyes can miss. He shows the boy how to look from the side, where light catches the line. It is not a craft of strength, it is a craft of surface. The boy nods. He has been taught to nod when he understands, and the men return to pressing, smoothing, sealing. G turn toward the canal. The air is lower here, cooler by a finger's width. On the bank stands a man with a wooden key, a lever with a notch that fits a gate's peg. He is not grand. His belt holds a knife and a small tablet case dark from handling. You watch him set the key, lean, and lift a sluice just enough for the head of water to slip under. The sound is a soft rush, like cloth pulled over a floor. He counts heartbeats. 10, maybe 12. Then he lowers the gate until water is a finger again. With the other hand he uses a reed to mark the mud at a post. Today's line, tomorrow's memory. People drift toward him to ask for a little more, a little earlier, a little longer. He listens, says little, and points with the key. Your turn is after theirs. It is not charisma that keeps the peace. It is schedule. Follow that thin line of water into a field, and you find the farmer's arithmetic that makes cities possible. A small channel runs level until it meets a slightly lower strip of ground. A man steps on the earthen ridge to pack it firm, then nick a small notch with a hoe so water spills into the square where barley will stand. When the square's sheen is even and no soil sticks to the ankle, he pats the notch closed and opens the next. There is no drama, only timing. Too little and barley sulks. Too much and a white crust eats the soil. Salt drawn upward by hot sun where standing water evaporated. You look down and you can see it here and there, a pale bloom like frost. The farmer has a cure, dull but effective. Move water, drain correctly, let a field rest, plant reeds in a ditch to drink what salt they can, lean on barley, which forgives more salt than wheat, until the land recovers. These decisions are not grand policy, they are morning practice. Back in the city, the same sense of enough guides the little rooms. A woman rinses a washing floor with a half jar, not a whole. She tilts the jar with a steady wrist, so the water walks where the plaster's slope invites it. It is not stinginess, it is a habit. Water that takes its time works better than water that panics. She lifts a lid, wood planed thin and rubbed with oil so it fits snug, and closes it gently when she is done. The lid will not warp because someone checked its grain and left it to dry under eaves, not in sun. 100 tiny kindnesses like this keep drain covers from rattling and doors from swelling. You cannot legislate such things, you teach them. In a nearby courtyard, a barber scrapes a jaw with a copper blade. He dips the blade in a bowl, wipes it on a cloth, dips again. The bowl sits on a low stool that lifts it one hand above dust, because dust rises only so far when a lane thrums with noon. He keeps a jar with a narrow mouth covered by a shard of pottery to keep out flies. He knows that water too warm softens skin and makes cuts more likely, and water too cold tightens skin and snags the blade. He aims for the middle. This is hygiene as craft, not as lecture. You want law, and the city gives you law in the slowest way, etched on clay, stored on shelves, quoted by men who sit near doors. If a man neglects a dike and water destroys a neighbour's field, he pays the loss in grain. If he lets a gate stay open and flood a lane, he repairs the damage and bears the cost. These are not laws for show, they are fences around carelessness. They do not create canals, they protect them from the human shrug. When a dispute reaches a threshold where a seated elder listens, barley and silver are weighed on scales with arms polished by generations of daily balance. A river will do what it does. People must be taught to do what they promised. Now look at the temple quarter again. Not for ritual this time, but for its accounts. A supervisor in a low room receives jars and returns jars. He scratches numbers for oil and water on a shard of broken pot, the day's scratch pad, then copies the totals to a tablet he will bake at week's end. In a bin near his knee are seals with animals: lion, bull, of fish, goat. He ties a reed fibre string around a jar's stopper and presses a soft lump of clay onto the knot, then stamps the clay with a seal. The jar can be traced. The basin will be full when it must be full. Priests may talk of purity, but the basin remains useful because someone empties it when the day grows warm and algae questions the water's honesty. He does not need a word for algae. He knows when water turns by smell and by the way light lies on it. The palace, if the city at this moment has a palace with a man who writes his name on bricks, also keeps lists. Kitchens ask for water by the jar load, and courtyards where visitors stand are sprinkled so dust makes no cough. Somewhere a superintendent notes which steps on the canal have lost too much edge, and writes a request for baked brick to be set at the waterline where jar rims bruise the clay. You can overhear the request without understanding the script. It sounds like this. We lose time when jars catch on ragged steps. Send shaped brick. Send someone who sets them true. The reply does not come wrapped in ceremony. A team shows up with trowels and a basket of bricks. The steps learn a new trick, to resist the 100 little bites of earthenware. You may think such order requires a single loud voice, but the city prefers choruses of soft ones. A guild of canal diggers gathers near a gate at noon and eats bread, onions and dates, washing hands from a jar poured by turns. One man is called foreman in practice because he remembers where a channel veered last season and how much slope is too much slope when a bank is weak. He does not recite geometry. He tells a story. The year of the short flood, we set the ditch too deep and lost the bank here. 2 fingers less would have spared us. The men nod and take 2 fingers less. This is engineering turned into memory. Walk east with the afternoon light behind your tables. Ow, and you find a dump where city endings are sorted. Shards pile into a crunchy hill that will become fill under a floor. Reed mats are stacked where they can dry, then burned for ash that laundresses prize. A grey powder that lifts grease and smell from cloth. The ash, mixed with oil, becomes a paste that can scour, or a gentle soap for skin when water is warm and work is done. A man with a rake pulls a layer back to let air through the heap. He watches for the heat shimmer that warns of a fire inside, the kind that smoulders for days and turns a pile into a kiln with no potter. He breaks it, spreads it, and the heat dies with a little sigh. Safety is an old hand with a rake. Inside the city again, a builder shows you how to think with a floor. He taps along a washing area with a knuckle and listens for hollows where plaster has lifted from brick. He kneads fresh plaster with a thumb and 2 fingers, testing grit. He skims a new layer thin as a fingernail and strokes the surface with the flat of his hand until it shines, a low sheen that sheds water and accepts a broom with no snag. He invites you to run your palm across the finished patch. It feels like a cool idea. This is not a temple gift. It is a home repair that keeps skin and cloth and tempers from sticking to the day. At a corner where 3 lanes meet, a little plaza holds a public jar stand, 4 uprights and a plank, where travellers can set jars, rest shoulders and tip water into a shallow basin to rinse hands. The basin's drain ties into the lane gutter with a small clay pipe. A boy assigned to the corner wipes the plank with a wet cloth when it grows gritty, and brushes flies away with a palm fan. He is paid by a shopkeeper whose doorway benefits from cleaner hands and calmer feet. Nobody writes a plaque, everybody notices. Evening leans on the roofs. The river's face browns and brightens as the wind turns. You walk to a place where a branch canal meets its parent channel. Here stands a structure you have not studied closely before. A weir, low, broad, and topped with boards set into slots. The boards can be lifted to release a surge or lowered to store a shallow head. The keeper of this place counts without numbers you can hear. He watches the tilt of floating reeds and the way foam curls at an edge. He feels the weight of water through the quay. When a runner arrives with a message, the north field's finished early, south asks for 1 more finger. The keeper chooses which board to lift and how far. He trusts the runner because the runner wears a small seal hanging from a cord that marks him as a canal man, not a wishful farmer. The system depends on signals people agree on ahead of time. The same evening teaches you another lesson. Water remembers yesterday's decisions. A lane flooded last week because a cover cracked where cartwheels skim. Today that cover is heavier and a half-hand wider. The brick edges where it sits have been cut back and relined with bitumen so the fit is tight and the lift is possible without prying up half the lane. If a solution requires heroics, the city will eventually abandon it. If a solution requires a good wrist and a sensible tool, it will last. You climb a stair to a roof and look down into a temple court where a basin gleams like a coin. A novice carries 2 jars in a yoke across his shoulders. He walks slowly so the water does not slap out and leave his sandals slick. He pours into the basin, lets the surface still, skims with a leaf, and sits. He watches a dragonfly rest on the rim. Later he will open the little spout near the base and let the day's water go down a lined run to a yard where plants drink the remainder. It is small stewardship, but it saves the basin from sourness and the court from smell. Rites do not make this work, habits do. Look out beyond the wall toward the fields again. The river is great, but it is not gentle by nature. Some years it withdraws and leaves boats sitting on mud like stranded beetle. Some years it spreads and tries to take houses by the corners. The city's survival depends on anticipation. In many households, people keep a mental list, raise the threshold by a brick before the heavy months, set the jar stand on stones, mend the drain's elbow where it cracked last hot season. In the offices by the gate, men keep an actual list. Clear the east ditch by the 3rd day of the 6th month. Reline the landing by the barley harvest. Raise the weir's centreboard when the upstream marker shows 2 hand widths over the post. The 2 lists, home and office, meet in practice. A city that survives is one where checklists get along. There is also the work nobody wants until it is too late. Dredging the black, slow silt in canals that have grown lazy. Crews tie ropes to a raft of bundled reeds, stand knee-deep in ooze, and pull a loaded basket up a plank. The silt glows like wet iron in the sun. They dump it into a cart, and the cart groans toward a low yard where the silt will dry, and later lift a floor out of dampness. The crew eats under a bit of shade. They do not sing about their job. The city eats because they do it. Inside one house, a woman teaches a child to keep a washing floor's lip clean with a scrap of cloth twisted into a cord. She runs the cloth along the lip and the channel's first hand length to keep grit from bulking into a plug. The child is bored. The mother is patient. The lesson is 15 seconds long. Later, after a rain, the lip will pull a puddle into the channel as intended. Nobody will praise the child. Nobody will learn the child's name from a tablet. Civilization is a habit taught to the impatient. Now, as night collects in the temple precinct, you see another form of water management, stories. A priest chants a tale of a god who brings flood and then restrains it, of a ruler who cuts a canal and claims favour, of order drawn on clay the way a net is drawn across a river. You do not need to believe or disbelieve to see the utility. People keep rules more reliably when they feel the rules are part of a larger, meaningful pattern. The myth is not plumbing, but it warms the hands that hold the tools. So who decides, you ask again, and the city answers with a distribution of decisions. The canal keeper with the key sets the day's finger of water. The scribe sets the record that keeps arguments brief. The farmer sets his notches. The builder sets the slope. The temple sets the basin's confidence. The law sets the fence around negligence. The palace, when it is wise, sets the crews to where a failing might fail loudest. No single door hides the answer. The answer is held in many pockets. That is why the city endures beyond one king's name and why a lane still knows which way to fall when a century has passed. You return to the weir at last light. The keeper lifts one board a palm's width and then stops, listening for something you cannot hear. He lowers it again with a resigned smile. He scratches a mark on his post with a reed, the tiniest of minutes. Somewhere upstream a runner will see a different mark on a different post and make a different choice. All these marks and choices drape over the river like a soft net that moves with it and never tries to stop it entirely. Stopping is for stone. Rivers prefer coaching. You descend into a lane where the day's heat still sits like a dull coin in the air. A girl rinses dust from a threshold with 2 ladles and brushes it into the gutter with a straw broom. A man sets a cover back with the heel of his hand, not the toe of his sandal. Less noise, less damage. A laundress gathers cloth and leaves a little moisture on the floor to cool the courtyard. A dog, wise with the city's rules, drinks from a shallow depression that always holds the last spoonful of someone's wash. The city is an orchestra with many small instruments, and most of them play piano. You sit on a low wall and let your own breath match this quiet governance. You think of the river, generute, and fickle. The canal, obedient when watched. The drain, patient when cleared. The basin, honest when refreshed. The washing floor, grateful for the right slope. The law, content when no one needs to read it aloud. Then you think of the years when a sovereign moves a canal gate for glory, or a drought nags 2 seasons in a row, or salt climbs into fields as if it owned them. Schedules strain. Lists grow heavy. Keys feel light in the wrong hands. And that is where you leave yourself, with one more question settling like silt at dusk. When the river's mood changes beyond habit, when floods carve new channels or the salt crust advances faster than farmers can forgive, can the city's distributed calm still hold, or must someone cut a bold new line through brick and field? And who among them will step first into the mud? Breathe in. 1, 2. Breathe out. 1, 2. You return to the river city with the softest of questions left from section 2. When the river's mood shifts beyond habit, can the city's distributed calm still hold, or must someone cut a bold new line through brick and field? And who steps first into the mud? You arrive at the edge of town before dawn. The air tastes of clay, and the reeds along a low canal whisper in a way you do not hear on ordinary mornings. The whisper is faster. Overnight, upstream rain has swollen the branch that feeds this district. The keeper with the wooden key stands at his weir, hunched as if listening through his shoulders. He senses more than he counts. Still water makes one sound on boards, hurried water makes another. He lifts a board the smallest amount and watches how quickly the head recovers. Too quickly. He lowers it again and scratches a mark into the post with a reed. A new level, not yesterday's. You walk the canal bank toward the city. The path is familiar, but the water is not. It noses higher at steps where jars usually meet the surface. It licks the bottom of landings that were dry last week. A boy hurries ahead with a message sealed by a clay tag. Open the northern relief gate 1 hand's width. You do not run. You move with the runners in your mind, past fields where notches in earthen ridges are closed with damp clods to keep the rush from curling into barley stands that were meant to be watered next week, not today. Farmers speak little. They set their feet on ridges to firm them and look to the gatehouses where decisions become inches. At the relief gate, 2 men brace the levers. The gate is stubborn. Joints tuned for daily flow do not open easily under a river's insistence. A foreman wets the rope and loops it twice around a peg, so the pull is steady rather than jerking. The wood complains in a deep voice. Bitumen smears where the gate has chafed in past seasons. Those dark lines are the memory of older floods. The board lifts with the slow dignity of something heavy and reluctant. Water shoulders through and throws a brown shoulder into a side channel that leads to low ground beyond the town, land that exists to receive such moods. You feel the city exhale, though nothing has ended. The tension has been given a place to go. Back in the lanes, keepers lift covers at the usual inspection points, not to scoop silt today, but to make sure the drains are not struggling with what has washed off roofs. You peer into one opening. The channel is not full, but its edges blur with speed. The cover goes back at once, a moving drain needs its lid, or it becomes a hazard for feet. In courtyards, householders raise jars one way instead of another so water can be poured indoors without bringing in the smell of damp silt. Doors open less often and close more firmly. The city knows how to behave in weather. By afternoon, the river steadies at high but honest. Canals settle into new rates. The relief channel carries away the anger, and the keeper at its mouth judges how wide to leave the gate. Enough to protect the town, not enough to starve the fields. You can almost hear him thinking. A hand and 2 fingers is too much. A hand is right. He signals with his chin to the youths who stand on the far bank with poles, ready to catch driftwood before it wedges where boards meet posts. The poles make a hollow knock against the wood. When a branch catches, 3 bodies lean together and lift it free. The act is small and saves an hour of prying later. And then the river turns petulant in a different way. A week later the flood has passed, but a branch canal has choked with silt where its entrance meets the main channel. It is a known weakness. Angle too shallow, current too eager to drop its load, not enough fall to carry heavy grains past the first bend. The city gathers its quiet council, not an official assembly in a palace court, but the collection of people who happen to do this work. The weir keeper, a builder who understands slopes, a scribe who keeps lists of baskets, a foreman who knows which crew can stand to their knees in black ooze and still laugh by noon. They walk the bank together and say little. The keeper points with his key. The builder kneels and runs a palm along the silt surface to feel how it has set. The scribe looks toward the fields that drink from this branch and imagines the numbers he will scratch. 2 crews for 3 days, each basket counted into grain. The foreman sets down a reed mat, kneels, and draws a plan with his finger. Cut a new mouth, sharper, lower the bed by 2 fingers, soften the first bend with shaped bricks. The builder nods once. The scribe draws a small wedge mark that means approved. No trumpet, no proclamation. Work begins at first light. You stand with the crews as they arrive. They tie a rope to a reed raft for the buckets. They cut the new mouth with square shovels that chatter in wet silt. 2 men set shaped bricks like teeth where the current first bites, bedded in bitumen smeared by a hand that knows how thick is thick enough. Another team lays short clay pipes along the inner curve so the bend is not a trap. The weir keeper opens his boards just a fraction to wash test water into the new MO. Ooth. Everyone leans their eyes. If the trial fails, they will feel it as much as see it. Water hesitating, eddies catching straw, the new bed refusing to be taken. The trial succeeds. Water slides in and carries its brown freight through the first turn without sulking in the corner. The foreman smiles with half his face and calls for a break. Work is paid in measures. The scribe's tablet receives marks. A basket of silt is not an idea. It is a weight. At a small table under a palm frond shade, a man tips 1 basket into another until the measure is true, then grants barley and bread in exchange. When someone tries to pass a half-filled basket as full, the foreman catches it with a glance. Cheating here is not a sin against a law code so much as a danger to the lane that will flood next week if people pretend to lift what they did not. Discipline is quiet and local. A look, a correction, a re-tip into the measuring basket. The list on clay is the record, the glance is the culture. All of this calm, persisting through change, depends on decisions made at human scale. Where to set a threshold, how high to raise a curb, which lip to skim smooth, which pipe to seat by a door, and which to root beneath a lane. But a city is not only thresholds and lips, it is also soil. Year upon year of irrigation changes ground you cannot see. When the sun drinks water from a field too often, it leaves behind salt. You notice it as a pale rim at the edge of a furrow, or the way barley's leaves curl when a farmer expected them to stand. That curl changes markets. Wheat gives way to barley because barley forgives the salt better. Fields lie fallow for longer. Water must be moved not only into the soil but through it, to leach bitterness down and away. The habit of enough meets the problem of accumulation. The hardest maintenance is of things you cannot feel in a single day. The city has answers, and each answer is a day's work. Dig shallow drains beside fields to carry washed salt lower. Plant reeds along ditches to drink and stabilise banks. Rotate plots, barley one season, fallow the next. And grazing, if there is grass, then a return only when the white bloom has thinned. When a canal slows and drops fine silt, dredge it before the bed rises to meet the surface. If the branch persists in catching silt at the mouth, redesign the mouth, not the laws. Everywhere the lesson is the same. Change the line so people can keep the habit. You visit households again because grand fixes begin in small rooms. After a season of high water, washing floors crack where plaster meets brick. A builder arrives with a bowl of fresh mix and a piece of smooth wood. He taps along the edge to hear the hollows. He cuts away what no longer adheres and rounds the corners slightly so the plaster will not lift the next time a child splashes water over the lip. He leaves his handprint, invisible, in the wet shine. The householder pays him in silver weight clipped from a ring, or in barley, if stories of a dry season have already reached this lane. The contract is simple, a floor that drains today and tomorrow. Temple basins receive new rules for wet weeks. Novices add a ladle of oil to the surface each morning, a very thin skin, to slow the growth that warms in still water. The oil is skimmed before ceremonies. The basin is drained more often, scrubbed with sand and a rough cloth, and refilled from jars carried with patient steps. The sand scours, the cloth polishes. You watch a novice finish a basin and stand back, not to admire, but to see if the surface settles without a tremor. Water that lies without trembling is a promise the court depends on. Priests sing, the basin does its quieter work. Laws speak to flood and negligence in their heavy way. If a man fails to keep his dike and water destroys a neighbour's harvest, he owes grain equal to the loss. If he cannot pay, the city finds another way to balance the books, labour on the canal crews until the debt fades under baskets. You imagine. The courtroom. Not marble, but clay benches. Not a judge in robes, but an elder with a stylus. The smell of bitumen drifting in from a repair outside. No one thinks the law makes water behave. They think the law makes people remember. And then there are years when the orderly answers do not suffice. A branch that fed the city may shift its allegiance, choosing a new course across the plain after a flood that cuts a fresh scar. The old mouth, cleaned and reshaped many times, starves. The keeper's key is suddenly for the wrong door. The city must decide what cities rarely choose without complaint, move the line. A new cut is planned from a different bend in the main channel. The plan is not a grand map, it is a series of stakes set by men with good feet and better eyes, each stake a promise of a day's work. Dig from here to here by the third day. Set bricks here where the bend will try to bite. Plant reeds at this corner to hold what cannot be mortared. The cutting days begin with dozens of bodies in mud to their shins. Baskets pass up a chain. Children carry water skins for the adults. A singer keeps a beat with a stick so the lift and tip does not tangle into chaos. The first trickle comes through and darkens the new bed like thought filling a sentence. The weir keeper lowers his old boards and lifts new ones he learned to love last week. The foreman walks the line that is now the city's new vein and tests a curve with his heel. The scribe makes a new tablet with a new heading, the date, the number of crews, the ration, then sets the old tablet on a shelf. The change is recorded and becomes ordinary by dusk. You stand with that knowledge and let it settle. The city's calm is not rigidity, it is responsive habit. When the river changes, people do not abandon routine, they move it. Drains still need lids that fit, basins still need skimming, floors still need the right fall. Weirs still need eyes attached to shoulders that can feel water push. Fields still need notches opened and closed in patient sequence. Only the alignment shifts. The rest, the culture of maintenance, stays exactly the same. In dry years, the story is different and, in its way, harder. Runners bring word of miles of grey stones in a riverbed that should be brown and moving. The canal keeper stores headwater behind boards and rations it into branches by a schedule that shrinks like a cloth washed too hot. The temple gives out water by lists, a jar per house at dawn, another at dusk. On the roofs, basins return, placed where sun warms them and where dust can be skimmed with a leaf. Householders keep lids on jars tighter. Floors are rinsed with a half ladle instead of a half jar. The city learns to prefer shade, to keep courtyards damp only at their mouths, not their middles, and to find every leak in a drain so the little water there is does not wander. You see wisdom here that feels like tenderness. Do less, but do it right. A drought lasts, and barley shrugs at fields that gave willingly last season. Men dig deeper wells, rings of baked brick descending into shadow. The rope marks polished at a certain height on well lips begin to creep lower. The sound made by the bucket changes, fuller at first, then a clattering echo that means water is farther from the hand. The city considers a cut from a still pool upstream that once seemed too shallow to matter. Now it matters. Crews scribe a new line toward it as carefully as they cut the flood relief when water was a bully instead of a miser. 2 crises, 1 response, adjust the path, keep the practice. Through all of this, the little rooms keep teaching the big lesson. A household with a vented shaft that is kept clean will not invite flies, and a neighbourhood that empties cesspits before heat grows heavy will not invite illness to walk its lanes. The city's health is not a single invention, it is the sum of small victories that repeat without applause. The lid set properly, the lip wiped daily, the joint re-see. Lead before it fails loudly. You hear that plea even now in your own places. Fix things while they are small. Love the boring work that keeps water in its place. When many centuries later these cities are described by people cutting trenches through their mounds, the notes that return with the strongest pulse are not about gold or thrones. They are about order, drains that still line up under rubble, brickwork that still shows the angle of a slope, a landing that is still 3 steps above where the water once stood, even though both steps and water are gone. The archaeologist's brush reveals a civilization that tried to persuade water rather than dominate it, and that built in layers of maintenance you can still see, patch on patch, each thin and careful, like the rings of a tree, if a tree could be made of clay and patience. Now bring your attention home to your own time. Pipes in walls, valves under sinks, traps that keep smells obedient, city basins on the edge of town where microbes, air and gravity do the dance you never watch. A waterboard votes on rates. A crew lifts a cover at 2 a.m. in rain. A maintenance budget is trimmed or restored, and with it, the speed at which a quiet failure turns into an audible one. The past offers you a simple mirror. When a city honours its keepers, the key holders, the sweepers, the plasterers, the dredgers, it sleeps better. You end at a weir in your mind, under a sky that belongs to no century. The keeper presses his palm to a board, feeling the push. Beside him stands the builder, the scribe, the foreman, the farmer who will open the first notch in his field when the board lifts, and the child who will one day learn to set a lid without a bang. They are deciding where the water should go now, not forever, because forever is made of no's that are handled well. They cut a new line when they must. They keep an old calm always. That is their genius. Breathe in. 1, 2. Breathe out. 1, 2. As you drift, a last question settles like silt at the bottom of clear water. In your own city, which matters more, the speeches about water, or the hands that lift the covers in the rain? And if you knew the names of those hands, would you vote, spend and praise differently so that the calm you enjoy at night survives the moods of the river tomorrow? Boring history for sleep. Why you wouldn't survive as a medieval midwife? Breathe in. 1, 2. Breathe out. 1, 2. Tonight you open a wooden door to cold air and wet stones. A boy has run to fetch you from your straw mattress and his knuckles are red from the knocking. Come quickly, he says, and that is all the notice you get. You are a midwife in a small medieval town, and your work begins when other work ends. At night, in weather, across lanes that keep their puddles even in summer. You lift a basket that waits by the door and check it by touch. Knife wrapped in linen. 2 lengths of thread, a small pot of oil, a folded woolen shawl, a flask, a candle stub, a loop of cord to strap the basket to your back. You lock your door with a wooden latch that has never felt secure and step into the dark. You do not walk quickly, you walk steadily. The streets are rutted, the stones hold yesterday's rain. You keep the basket high because if your tools get wet, they will stick and you will lose time drying them over a fire when you need your hands for other things. The town is quiet except for animals and a distant cart. Someone always works late in a place that calls itself small. The house you seek is near the tannery, where the smell is rude in the day and worse in the damp. You knock only once. Inside, someone pulls the bar and pulls you through. It begins the same way it always begins, with a room that pretends to be warm, a bed that is too soft or too hard, a woman whose face is set into the long work of bringing a child into a world not built for easy arrivals. Her mother is there, maybe her sister, a neighbour who will fetch hot water and firewood. A priest will not be called unless things turn hard, and even then he may come too late. Your presence is the plan, your experience is the medicine. You are the one person here who has seen this work enough times to K. Now what is ordinary, what is alarming, and what ordinary can become if it is left too long without small, careful help? You rub your hands with oil warmed in your palm. Soap in this town is lye and fat if you can get it, ash and water if you cannot. You keep your nails short with a knife, not for fashion, but because skin tears easily when labour is long and hands are rough. There is no germ theory, there is habit. Do not touch what is dirty and then touch what is not. Rinse with hot water when you can. Keep linens in their bundle until you need them. You are not a physician. You are not licensed by a university. Your credential is an oath you swore before the parish. To be present when called, to be honest when a child is born dead and not tell the family what would comfort you more than them. To baptize the infant yourself with water and the right words if breath looks unlikely. To keep from using certain herbs in certain ways for certain ends that make priests nervous and neighbours gossipy. You promised not to trade in secrets that lead to scandal. You promised to keep women safe with what you know and to say when you do not know. You learn as much as you can before you go near the bed. When did the pains begin? How far apart? How long did the last child take? How many children came before? What happened to them? You ask about bleeding. You ask about fevers in the last weeks. The answers are often small words and shrugs because the woman is busy and the people around her remember only what pressed on them hardest. You judge by looking and by listening, the sound of breath, the posture between pains, the way she chooses to stand or sit or lie. If she has a birthing stool, you pull it near the hearth to make use of the heat and the light. If she does not, you make a stool of your knees and a chair turned backward, with a folded blanket, where a body will need kindness. Most. Your basket has nothing that would look like a miracle to a later age, and yet it holds enough. The candle for light where it matters, the knife for the cord, the thread for tying and for other uses if you must improvise. Oil for skin and for hands, a small needle and length of fine thread you hope you will not need, a cloth for wiping a newborn's mouth and nose, a bit of wool for warmth. You look for clean linens in the house. There are not many, never are. You ask for the best of the few. Someone brings water to simmer, not to make it safe by a theory you lack, but because warm water loosens tight things and cleanses better than cold when you have little of both. You speak in a voice that holds the room steady. The mother finds your tone first, then the others. You tell her what she already knows in a way that makes the knowledge useful. Breathe here, turn here, hold when the pain lifts, rest when it passes. You encourage her to drink a little, to keep strength where strength is spent by inches. You wipe her forehead with a cloth that smells faintly of smoke and wool. You make a joke, one you have made 90 times because you know it will land, that the town's bells should learn to ring softer when a woman labours, because they clang as if their work is hard. The room answers with a snort or a smile. This, too, is medicine. You are wary of interference dressed as help. An aunt will want to push at the wrong time. A neighbour will bring a charm to tie around a wrist that has never helped anyone who had real need. Someone will want to tug when the child's head shows and scares them with its shining and its stillness. You say no plainly and place hands where they will count. You do not work alone. You enlist the grandmother to hold the mother's shoulders, the sister to keep the lamp trimmed, the neighbour to bring water not just once but every time you ask. You give jobs because jobs turn nerves into action and action into steadiness. You carry, carefully, the weight of too many outcomes. There are days when a child slides into your hands, slick as a fish. And the cord, a neat loop to be untied and tied again above the belly with the thread you brought. There are days when a child's shoulder meets a pelvis too narrow for the path it needs. On those days you reach inside with hands you have warmed and oiled and try what you learned from a woman older than you. A turn this way, a lift that way, a pause until a pain speaks again, a lowering of the mother's hips, a raising of her knees, a shift to the stool, a return to the bed, a whispered word that is not magic but rhythm. You do not have forceps. The word has not been invented here. The tool will not be invented for centuries. You have patience measured in heartbeats and the knowledge that panic shrinks space and breath makes it wider. If breath does not come, you act quickly without appearance of haste. You cup the child, wipe the mouth and nose, rub the back, blow gently across the lip. You say the words you promised to say if life hangs by a thread and time is shorter than hope. Water on the brow, a name given, a soul recognised. The church gave you this duty because you are there when others are not, because a priest cannot be everywhere, because the town understands that saving a life and recognising a loss are neighbours in the same street. You do not tell stories to soften what is hard. You speak the truth so the family can grieve without arguing with lies later. Truth is not comfort, but it is clean. When both mother and child do well, your work does not end. You watch for bleeding that does not stop. You press the belly to feel whether the womb is firming or lax. You watch her eyes, her colour, the way her hands lie quiet or restless on the blanket. You tie the cord again if it weeps. You wrap the child in bands that will look too tight to a later age and very proper to this one. You settle the mother so that she lies where air moves but not where it drafts. You tell the family to bring a broth, not a roast, and to let her drink as she pleases, to keep the room clean, the cloth under her changed, the hands that touch her washed in warm water before and after. You are not reinventing the world. You are keeping it from unravelling. What you do for the mother in the weeks after the birth is as important as what you do in the hours. You visit on the 2nd day and the 5th on the 8th if the walk is not too hard. You check the belly again, the bleeding, the breasts. You show the family how to lay the child so it can breathe without effort. You remark on the little things that the family will ignore unless someone points with care. The smell that suggests infection, the heat in a breast that feels like wrong fire, the dizziness that means blood is low, the sadness that lingers beyond what a few tears can spend. You have no list of diagnoses. You have a list of worries you keep in your head and share in your tone. You tell them when to sit the mother up and when to let her lie. You tell them about churching and when it will be, 40 days for many places, to bless both mother and room, and to mark the end of a period of seclusion that protects as much as it isolates. Your work is not only in rooms with women and children. Sometimes an official asks for you when the court needs to know if a woman is with child or not. You do not like this work. It makes you a witness when you would prefer to be a helper. But you go because you live in a town, and towns are made of obligations not chosen. You report what you find, carefully, without telling more than the truth. Your reputation depends on restraint. You cannot afford to be seen as someone who uses knowledge to harm. Rumours about midwives stick. They smell like smoke and live for months in curtains and hair. You keep your house one step cleaner than others because cleanliness is a speech people hear even when they cannot read. Training came to you by hands, not by parchment. You learned from a woman who learned from a woman who learned from another, and if someone writes a manuscript above birth in your lifetime, it will not cross your hands. Books are for men and monasteries. You share what you know by bringing a younger woman to a birth and asking her to warm oil and hold a candle and press a cloth and feel with her hand where a head lies in the dark. You teach her to listen to a breathing pattern as if it were a psalm, to count pains by the window's light and by the way someone's jaw sets, to look at a child's colour and know whether it wants heat, milk or time. Payment is another thread you hold. A family gives you coins if they have coins, bread if they have bread, cloth if they have cloth, a promise of meat when meat returns to their yard in spring if winter has taken it all now. You refuse sometimes when loss has taken more than you can count. You charge more sometimes when a household is proud and could pay what it owes but does not. You do not have a written schedule. You have knowledge of who is poor and who is stingy and who is generous between these. You share a loaf that looks too large for one plate and too small for many. The town sees this sharing and tucks the memory away. Reputation is a grain store. It feeds you when winter is rude. You worry about things you cannot name the way later ages will. Fever after birth is a beast without a chain. You wash your hands, you keep your cloths cleaner than anyone around you thinks necessary. You tell people not to crowd into the room when their breath will make heat into suffocation. Still, fever finds women you have held and takes them where you cannot follow. Someone will whisper a word that has followed women who know things since stories were first told, witch, and you will keep your jaw loose and your eyes quiet and let the whisper disperse by offering to sit with the baby while the family sleeps. The town needs you too much to harm you openly, but need can turn fast when grief gnaws. You care that. Now which doors to knock in the morning and which to pass by at dusk. By day, you are also a neighbour who tends small life. You tend your own hearth, rinse your own floor, keep your own jar full. You feed a chicken that lays irregularly. You stretch a piece of cloth into a sleeve and then into a rag and then into a strip that will tie a cord. Everything you do is the same colour as your work. Steady, necessary, free of flourish. You rest when you can rest. You learn to sleep through small sounds so you can wake at large ones. A fist on your door at midnight, a bell that calls for fire, the sound of a hoof that should not be on your lane. You wear your shawl around your shoulders even at home because the door never stays closed long and night air is its own kind of wet. You also carry an oath that is not written down. Do not boast. If you save a life, the family will tell your story without your help. If you fail, your habit will protect you better than speech. You prepare for anger the way you prepare for labour, with patience, acceptance, and the touch that moves gently from work to comfort. You keep a catechism of practical sentences ready. She did as she should. The child came as it chose. I did what I have done for many. The day did what days do. It is not resignation. It is truth shaded for peace. Some truths are not for stormy hours. Why wouldn't you survive this work? It is not only the night roads and the wet rooms, the absence of tools someone will one day call standard, the danger of fever, the absence of sleep. It is the weight of families' hopes, of neighbours' gossip, of officials' questions, of priests' doctrines, of your own count of losses and gains written nowhere but on the inside of your ribs. You must be strong without looking hard, decisive without seeming proud, present without becoming a distraction. You must enter every room as if you belong to it, and leave every room as if it belongs to itself. You sit now in the corner of the room while the mother dozes and the child chirps like a kettle losing its last heat. You trim the lamp so the flame does not smoke. You fold the cloths that can be washed and set aside the ones that cannot. You speak to the family about small chores that will keep the next hours quiet. Open the shutter, a hand's width at dawn. Bring broth before your own meal. Change the linen when the kettle is hot. You say you will return. You always say you will return. It reassures them and holds you to a duty that cannot be written on a tablet because the town has no clerk for the hours between midnight and cockcrow. When you finally step outside, the lane gives you the sound of a far-off watchman's rattle. He marks the hour and the safety of the night by habit, and you feel for a moment that the world is made of useful repetitions. His circuit around the walls, your circuit between doorways, the circuit of water from kettle to cloth to floor to drain. The sky is just thinking about light. A rooster has opinions. You lift your basket strap to ease your shoulder. The house behind you is quiet in the right way. You let your breath match the day's first cold and set your feet for home. But just as you turn the corner, a shape steps from a doorway. a girl you do not know well, the daughter of an ironworker who moved here last spring. She clutches her belly as if it hurts in a way that is not labour. Her face is wrung with worry that has nothing to do with a child's timing. She asks a question you have heard only a few times and never easily. If a woman cannot be a mother this season, what can a midwife do and what must she refuse? Breathe in. 1, 2. Breathe out. 1, 2. You are still in the lane, basket strap across your shoulder, dawn hardly awake. The ironworker's daughter stands with her hands crossed low, not like labour at all, more like someone trying to hold a private storm inside a small room. Her question is not loud, but it is heavy. If a woman cannot be a mother this season, what? What can a midwife do, and what must she refuse? You answer nothing at first. Midwives live longer when they use silence like clean cloth, placed where it protects and hides nothing essential. You lead her a few steps from the doorway, where voices become dull and walls do not listen. The town seems empty, but every shutter has ears. You tell her to breathe and to say only what must be said. You are not a priest and not a judge. You are the person women come to when words are too sharp for daylight. The air smells of old rain and forge smoke. A cart rattles a street away. The girl stares at her shoes. What do you know, and what do you admit that you know? You know that in your time, law and custom do not share a single book. The parish priest speaks one language, souls, sin, penance, baptism, marriage, and the town speaks another. Fines, witnesses, oaths, the word of a neighbour against the word of a neighbour. Both claim to protect the weak. Both can harm them. Somewhere between them you must walk without falling through. In many places you have worked, midwives swear an oath, to come when called, to keep women and infants from harm as far as your skill allows, to baptize in danger, to refuse harmful potions, to tell no secret that would bring a woman ruin unless the law compels you, to present yourself to the priest when a child is born dead or doubts touch its soul, to stand ready when the town asks you to examine a prisoner or a widow or a girl in a case where men must not be present. You remember the words you spoke with your palm on a book you could not read. I will act as a Christian woman should, in honesty and obedience, and I will not bring death when life has been given into my hands. You also know what poverty does to virtue. There are seasons when a loaf is thin as paper, and rent is due, and a father's temper is hungrier than his stomach. There are towns where an unmarried mother finds no door open and no work waiting. You have seen the way a young woman learns to make herself small to pass between judgment and laughter. You have stood between a husband and a wife at midnight because the child cried and he drank and blamed the nearest living thing. You carry all of this into your answer. You speak gently, because gentleness is a key that opens the next minute. You say, first we see what is. You ask the girl when she bled last, whether she has been sick in the mornings, whether her breasts have changed, whether her belly feels heavy or only upset. You tell her that quickening, the first felt movements, arrives late for some and early for others, that many troubles imitate one another, that fear can mimic anything. You do not touch yet. You let her talk until the tight shape of her worry loosens and true details appear. A missed bleeding, a moment that should not have been, a promise made by a man who left with the travelling smiths last week and will return when the leaves turn, or never. You think of the tools you have and the line you must not cross. You have broths that calm cramps and broths that wake a sleepy stomach. You have herbs that help monthly bleeding come on when it is late for ordinary reasons, pennyroyal, rue, and others whispered in kitchens. But you also know that such things can be cruel to the woman who drinks them, as well as to what may be growing inside her. You have seen a neighbour's niece die from a dose that an aunt swore was gentle. You have taught your apprentice a rule without poetry. Do not give a cup you would not drink yourself, and you would not. So you do not give it to the girl. Instead, you do what midwives do when words are knives. You move the problem from a cliff to a path. You say, we will count days, we will watch, we will keep you fed and warm. We will ask the widow 2 doors down to let you spin in her room for a while so you do not meet too many eyes. And we will keep your hands busy, because hands that work quiet are racing head. And if day follows day and a child declares itself, we will plan where you can lie in with a door that locks and a hearth that burns, and we will bring you through it if we can. You do not promise what you cannot command. You never do. You know the church's care and its fear. A priest blesses mothers. He also watches midwives. He listens for stories of women who ask to be rid of children before those children kick, of herbs used for more than cramps, of baptisms whispered over blue lips too late or not at all. In dangerous births you have poured water and said the words yourself. You have felt the relief of saving a life twice, with breath and with sacrament. And you have felt the deep, wordless ache when you saved neither. You keep a small bottle of clean water in your basket for such nights. It weighs almost nothing and everything. The lawmen, aldermen, bailiffs, reeves come to you for other reasons. They summon you when a girl is accused of concealment, or a wife is suspected of adultery and a belly's shape might be evidence, or when a prisoner pleads pregnancy to delay a sentence. You do not relish this duty. You share it with other women because men cannot look. You are expected to bring hands and honesty, never opinion. You do what law expects, observe, report, no more. In this work, every extra word is a torch in a thatch-roof town. You have learned to say, "This I felt," and stop. You go home by a long way when the street is full of whispers, because midwives survive by arriving quietly and leaving more quietly still. In your own practice, you draw boundaries in chalk no one else can see. 1. You will not give a cup that means harm by design. 2. You will not stir talk that eats a woman alive. 3. You will help a woman leave a house that becomes a trap if you can do it without setting the parish on fire. 4. You will find a way for a girl to earn, even a little, when a belly narrows her choices. 5. You will speak to a priest you trust when the matter exceeds your hands, because there are such priests, stern and kind, who know that a life can be ruined by zeal as surely as by sin. You tell the iron, "Worker's daughter, a piece at a time. We will give you bread first," you say. "Then we will watch. If you are with child, we will find where you can rest before the town points. If you are not, we will talk about how to be clever next time." You do not discuss charms or knots or calendar methods in a way that teaches. You only murmur what every older woman already tells a younger one. Make your own choices around men who love lightly, and choose a friend to walk with when lanes are too quiet. None of this is a recipe. All of it is survival. You check her quietly, because sometimes a pain is not a pregnancy at all, but something that needs a physician or a barber who sets bones and lances boils. You are careful, respectful. You say what you feel. You are likely with child, or you are not certain yet, or you are ill, not pregnant, go home, keep warm, come to me tomorrow. Certainty is rare. You do not pretend to have it when you do not. A midwife who speaks past her knowledge does not keep her basket long. You think of the women you serve and their long aftercare, the quiet weeks after birth when a room should be clean and the floor swept and the broth strong and the hands washed. You think of how seclusion protects as much as it isolates, and you think of the cost when a woman faces those weeks alone because the father is a shadow and the neighbours are loud. If there is charity in the town, it is uneven and often tired. You have seen parishes keep lists: salt for the old, a loaf for a widow, a place by the fire for a child with no mother. You have also seen lists thrown away when the harvest is light. You are, in a quiet way, a list of your own. You remember who has spare linen, who can be asked for broth without humiliation, who will lend a corner of their room to a woman who needs a door more than she needs advice. You remember, too, the edge cases that test any oat. H. A husband who returns from war and finds an infant too young to be his. A midwife called to a room where a body lies cold and a child is not to be seen. A night when footprints lead from a riverside. You have stood in those rooms and felt the weight of all the unasked questions. The law can be quick and clumsy. Grief can be quicker and clumsier. You have learned to slow a room with little tasks, fetch water, untie a knot, stoke the fire, until the violent moment passes and words find their proper size. You cannot heal everything. You can keep harm from multiplying in the first hour. You return the girl to her doorway with instructions small enough to fit inside a brave morning. Eat, rest, come to me tomorrow at first light when the market bells ring. You promise nothing and offer everything that is honest. Your time, your attention, your presence if the worst becomes worse. Your refusal to hand her a poison disguised as a solution. She nods, which is the best you can hope for before breakfast. The latch closes softly. You stand a long moment and let the lane breathe. The day fills with ordinary duties. A lying-in you must visit at noon, a wash you must teach a husband to do without bruising a tender belly, a cord you must check again because it wept yesterday, a breast you must warm with cloth and gentle pressure where wrong heat flickered last night. Your apprentice follows with a basket and 3 questions in her eyes at all times. You teach by letting her touch, a shoulder to brace a stool, a hand to steady a lamp, and by letting her listen to your tone when you speak to a woman who is frightened. You say little because little is remembered. In the afternoon, the bailiff sends for you. A case, he says. There was blood in a lane near the abbey wall. A neighbour saw a girl running. There is talk. You do not sigh. You go. This is the part of your work that scours rather than heals. You enter a cool room with a bench and 2 women already waiting, one older midwife from the far side of town, and a widow who keeps the church door tidy. The accused sits with her, hair loose, eyes on the floor. The bailiff says you must examine, not judge. You do as you swore. Observe, report, no more. You handle this like fire. Calm, precise hands, a face with no story in it, words that fit the question and do not offer a path to anger. When it is done, you wash your hands twice and leave by a door that leads to the courtyard rather than the street. You are tired in a way that soup cannot mend. You sit on a low wall and think of how your work holds two poles: mercy for women in rooms where no one else can stand with them, and truth for a town that will devour itself without rules. You hold both in the same hands. There are days when that feels possible. There are days when you are not sure. You pass the church at Vesper light. A mother you delivered last winter stands with a bundle. The child's cheeks are round as apples. She smiles with the relief of someone who climbed a wall and found the other side flat and green. You bless her with a nod you hope looks like nothing to anyone else. This is your wage too, small lives that learn to breathe with your help. You carry them like quiet coins sewn into a hem. Evening comes. You sit at your table with a heel of bread and a mug of small ale, and you write nothing because midwives keep their records in memory and muscle. You rewrap your knife. You wind your thread back around its bit of bone. You wash your cloths and hang them near the hearth, not too close. You polish your lamp so it will not smoke at a bad moment. You set aside a loaf for the ironworker's daughter to take when she returns, payment for a promise she has not asked you to make. You plan tomorrow's steps, the noon visit, the market, the talk with the widow about the spare bed, the quiet word with a priest who is strict in sermons and kind in hallways. Before you sleep, you stand in your doorway and look at the lane. It is clean enough. For a poor town, someone has swept. Someone has emptied a bucket where it will do least offence. You think of the layers of care that make a place livable. Drains that carry away what must go, wells that give, hands that wash, women who come when called and stay when others tire, words spoken carefully in rooms where truth can either heal or break. You allow yourself one long breath and one small pride. You have kept your oath today, and perhaps tomorrow you will too. But sleep does not come quickly. Your mind holds the girl's question as if it were a small, hot stone. You imagine her returning, belly still quiet or not. You imagine the bailiff asking again for your hands to tell a story no one wants to hear. You imagine the priest asking whether you baptize soon enough when breath is slow to arrive. You turn on your side and listen to the hearth whisper. You ask yourself a question no oath can answer fully. When mercy and rule pull in opposite directions, one toward the single woman before you, the other toward the order that keeps many safe. Where should a midwife place her hands, and who will hold them steady when both choices bruise? Breathe in. 1, 2. Breathe out. 1, 2. You wake before the bell because habit is older than sleep. A pot on the hearth ticks softly as it cools. Your basket waits at the door, re-wrapped last night. Knife wiped and oiled. Thread wound smooth. Cloths clean and dry. The small flask of water that is not for thirst. Your hands remember what the day might ask. You do not know the order of it, no midwife ever does, but you know the shape: a room, a lamp, a woman's breath. Small tasks that hold fear at the edges. Your first call comes sooner than the light. A boy's knock, a whisper, the ironworker's door. You tie your shawl and step into a lane that still tastes of ash from evening hearths. The sky has turned from black to the colour of old pewter. You walk the route you learned in your feet long ago. Rise of curb, hollow where rain sits, the place your heel must not find because a stone shifts there. You reach the house and tap the ichwishkipayud. Latch with your knuckle. 3 soft taps that say your name without sound. Inside, the ironworker's daughter sits on a low stool near the hearth, not because labour has come, but because she has come as you asked. She holds the loaf you set aside last night. Her eyes are less sharp than they were in the lane. You make tea that offers warmth more than help and ask small questions that do not bruise. Sleep, bleeding, pains, the face in her mind when she closes her eyes. She tells you enough. You listen for the places where your answer must be firm and the places where it must be kind. You tell her again the plan you gave her yesterday. Feed, rest, watch, because plans sink in slowly when fear is loud. She nods and eats under your roof where no one else can see her mouth move. When she goes, you send her by the short way and stand in your door until she turns the corner. You are not her keeper, you are her witness. That is sometimes the only thing a town will allow. You have scarcely washed your cup when a messenger from the North Lane arrives, breathless, hands splayed like a rooster. Come, the pains are strong. You lift your basket and go without finishing the wash. The house is one you know. The mother is not new to this. She knows the rhythms, but her face is drawn in a way that warns you this will be hard. The room is warm enough. The bed is clean enough. The stool is fetched and set where light can be borrowed from the small window. You check the child's station with your oiled hand, slowly, respectfully, speaking as you learned to speak, telling the mother what you feel in words that she can carry between pains. The head is there but not centred. A shoulder has opinions. You send the neighbour for wood to boil water and the husband for a length of clean cloth to twist into a rope that will become a handle for the mother to pull against when you ask. Your posture charts hand. And guess almost not at all, but your mind takes off its cloak and steps into the river. You have seen this before. The path is narrow, the shoulder bars the way. You could panic and make the room small. Or you could widen the room with breath. You choose breath. You show the mother how to tuck her knees and lean forward when the pain rises, how to let the rope hold some of the work. When the pain falls, you use your hands the way the woman who trained you taught you. Fingers a map, not a spear. The gentlest pressure in the direction the body already wishes to go. A neighbour stares at the rope as if it were a miracle. You know it is only physics, with a prayer draped over it for people who need prayers to unlock their shoulders. The pains come closer. The shoulder gives one finger's width, then another. You murmur nonsense the way women do when they keep a bird from startling. There, good, easy, because cadence is a drug ancient as lullabies. The husband attempts to help and nearly undoes your work by pulling at the wrong time, then stops when you put your palm on his wrist without looking at him at all. He takes the rope instead and gives it back to the mother when you ask. The head crowns, shining and quiet, and for a heartbeat the room holds itself still in a perfect circle of effort and fear. Then there is movement that is more than movement, and you receive what the night has been holding away from the world, a child, wet and heavy as truth. Silence follows, which is the one thing you cannot abide. You do not wait for life to decide whether it wishes to begin. You wipe the mouth and nose, lay the child belly down along your forearm with the head a little lower, rub the back with a cloth warmed on the pot's lid, and blow softly across the lip. The child answers, not with a shout, but with a complaint, which is better. It means muscle and air and will. You bless whatever humble process makes such a sound. You place the child on the mother's chest and let skin teach skin what to do. You tie the cord in 2 places and cut between with a knife that knows only this work. You check the mother's bleeding, watch the womb with your palm, feel for firmness. You do not rush the afterbirth. You guide, you wait, you do not pull. The room exhales. The husband weeps without hiding it, which will make him stronger later. The neighbour laughs and covers her mouth as if laughter were a rudeness. You set the lamp to a lower flame. You teach the mother to press her own belly just so. You ask for broth and make sure it comes. You wave away the aunt's charm with a gentleness that looks like consent and is not. Then the child's colour dips, the way clouds cover the sun for a breath on a day you thought would remain bright. You do not let anyone see your face change. You rub again, you blow again. You bring the child to the mother's breast and show the child's mouth how to find what it must find. The colour rises like blush returning to a cheek. You pretend you never feared. The room pretends with you. This is one of your services, the saving of a room's memory. You stay until the afterbirth is delivered cleanly. You examine it as you always do, quietly, thoroughly, without announcing what you look for, because a retained piece is a seed for fever. You check the mother's bleeding again. You wrap the baby more loosely when heat grows brave. You swap the cloth beneath the mother for a clean one, which feels to her like ceremony and is merely good sense. You wash your hands. You wash them again. You tell the sister to wash hers, and you do not let her joke about it. You have no theory of invisible threats, only a lifetime's ledger of rooms that smelled wrong before fever came. By mid-morning you can leave without leaving. You make promises. A return after noon, a check before the bell that marks the day's third part, another in the evening if the lamp's wick lasts. The husband presses coins into your palm and looks ashamed that they are fewer than he wishes. You fold them into your sleeve without counting, which is kindness, and tuck a scrap of bread he tries to hide for you into your basket, which is also kindness because hunger likes honest homes as much as dishonest ones. Back in your lane you bend to pick a splinter of wood from your heel and hear your name in the voice of a messenger you do not recognise. Come to the priory, he says, and your stomach understands before your mind does. A burial, perhaps. A question the priest does not want to carry alone, or a baptism not done in time. You go because a midwife goes where people sit in straight lines and speak in careful words when they do not want to be careful. The priory's stone is cool and smells of old air. The priest is the one you trust, strict from the pulpit, clear-eyed in a kitchen. He asks what you saw in a house yesterday where a child did not breathe long. You describe without embroidery, the pains, the time, the colour, the water, the words you poured. He nods without triumph, records what must be recorded. Thanks you as a man, thanks a woman whose work he cannot do. You leave the same door you came in by, the quiet door, not the public one. On your way home you stop where the market presses into a funnel of noise between 2 buildings. The spice seller's wife whispers that the ironworker's daughter was at the well with a bundle under her shawl. You say nothing. You buy onions you do not need, so your silence has a reason to be standing there. You carry them in your basket like a secret that is not yours to unwrap. The afternoon is an account book of small visits. You go back to the north lane and look again at the mother's colour. You pinch the nail of the baby's thumb to see how quickly blood returns. You show the grandmother the gentle squeeze that encourages milk from a place that aches. You find the husband sweeping the threshold, a rare and excellent sight, and you praise him as if he were a boy, because praise makes good habits write themselves deeper. You leave instructions for the evening. Open the shutter a hand's width, not more. No crowds, no strong. Drink, broth before bread. They nod because it is easier to nod than to argue with the woman who saved a life by pretending not to. You stop next at a narrow house where a mother you visited a week ago sits with fever slipping and catching in her skin. You warm cloths and lay them under her arms and across her chest. You coax her to sip. You change the cloth. You strip and rinse and hang the bedding. You open the shutter when steam clings to the beam. You close it when a draught threatens. The husband, lost without tools, asks whether to send for the barber surgeon. You say yes, not because you love his knives and his boldness, but because he can bleed a measure and you cannot, and sometimes the city needs his confidence like a door needs a bar. You stay until the fever's pulse learns you are watching. You mark in your mind the names of 2 women who can sit tonight and change cloths on the hour if need be. You will repay them before winter with bread, with a word at a gate, with the loan of a pot when a child is born, and the kitchen is too small. The bell for Vespers is still in the throat of the tower when the day decides it has one more thing to teach you. A neighbour runs hard to your door, hair unpinned, shoes wrong on the wrong feet. By the river, she says, a girl, a bundle. Your legs are tired but not done. You run, no pretense of steadiness now, down the path you do not like at dusk, the path where reeds hide too much. At the bank a knot of people stands in the posture of those who have not yet agreed what they see. You push through with the authority of function. Make way, make way. You kneel. The bundle is wrapped foolishly and well, both at once. Inside, a child whose breath is not decided. You have no time for outrage. You warm the child with your own shawl. You rub as if polishing a brass plate that has not shone in a year. You blow and speak and blow again. In. A small, broken sound returns to you from whatever gate stands just in front of the child. You hand the child to a woman with better arms at this moment than yours, and you walk to the water to wash your hands because everyone is watching, and they must see what care looks like. Later, there will be questions you cannot answer. Who left the bundle? Whether desperation or shame or violence walked ahead of those feet. The bailiff will look for footprints the river has already licked away. The priest will prepare words for a baptism that carries more relief than celebration. You will make a place in your memory for a girl who placed a life at the edge of water and hoped the town would be kinder than she could afford to be. Your oath did not foresee this. Your hands did. Night comes, but not the end of work. You light your lamp and trim the wick with the small knife that has learned patience. You visit the north lane again, as promised. The child sleeps with the mouth exactly wrong and exactly right. Open a little, breath louder than seems polite. The mother thanks you with her eyes, and a hand that reaches for your fingers and squeezes without words. You check the bleeding. You check the womb. You check the warmth of the child's feet. You untie and retie the bands because your hands remember a better tension than the aunt's. You lower the lamp again. You leave while the child is still sleeping so the room will remember you as quiet. At home, you wash your cloths one more time, even though you could be forgiven for leaving them to soak. You lay them where they will dry with the heat that remains. You tip your lamp to see if the oil will last another night if it must. You set aside a portion of bread, the habit of a woman who never forgets the person who might knock late. Then you sit at your table with your elbows on wood and your eyes shut, which is not sleep but a gentle rehearsal. Your mind runs through the little ledger. North Lane, good. Fever house, watch, river, ask the priest to find milk if the mother cannot be found. Ironworker's daughter, meet at the bell, Tom. Oro, you do not pray with a list because you have prayed with your hands all day. You simply say, thank you for what did not go wrong. You might ask, in a century that knows instruments by name, why you would not survive this work. It is not only the lack of forceps and antiseptic, not only the night roads and the doorways that open onto heat and noise when your bones want quiet. It is the compound weight, of rooms that need your calm when you have none left, of laws that want your hands as evidence when you would prefer they remain tools, of priests who need your honesty and will doubt you if you have too much of it, of neighbours who thank you with bread and blame you with whispers depending on the wind. You must carry births and funerals in the same basket and not let either spill into the wrong room. And yet there is a surplus too, that cannot be measured on a parish board, a child who learns to breathe because you were stubborn about rubbing a back. A fever that does not climb because you changed a cloth before anyone else thought to. A girl who eats bread at your table in the dim before dawn and walks home steadier than she arrived. A husband who sweeps because you looked at his broom as if it were a sword. A priest who writes fewer hard words because you poured water when water needed to be poured. The ledger is not even, it is merciful. You blow out your lamp and lie down, and your last thoughts run like a dry channel after rain. How many things must go right, quietly, for a town to sleep? How many women's hands teach a city to be soft where it could be hard? Hands that wash thresholds, trim wicks, fetch water, keep secrets, speak truths. You wonder about the future, which you will never see. Rooms bright with clean light, basins that fill themselves, tools that learn not to wound, laws that listen to women in their own words, nurses and midwives who study in halls with windows and books with margins. You know that even in such rooms, there will still be a need for a person who can keep fear from making a small space smaller, who can make ordinary work sound like safety. Breathe in, 1, 2, breathe out, 1, 2. The day has made you hollow in the right way, like a cup that has been used and washed and set to dry. Sleep comes as if it has been waiting outside your door all along. Before you fall, a thought looks at you. If a civilization is judged by the quietest rooms, by how it greets new breath, by how it keeps fever from returning, by how it honours the hands that do the boring labour of care, what would your own time look like if you paid the same attention to thresholds, to clean cloths, to fair wages, to the oath that says, I will show up when called? Breathe in, 1, 2, breathe out, 1, 2. You wake before the courtyard rooster, because caravans always begin in the hour that belongs to no one. The sky is the colour of cooled iron. Around you, the caravanserai is a hollow square, thick walls, wooden doors, a well in the centre with a stone lip polished by 1,000 ropes. Camels kneel in 2 patient rows, double humps canted like small hills. A sleepy dog lifts its head, decides you are no news, and folds itself again. You pull on your boots, wrap your head against dust you cannot yet see, and learn the first low truth of the road. If you dawdle, the sun will not. Your day starts with water, and water starts with weight. You cradle a goatskin by the well and watch a man work the rope, palm over palm, in a rhythm that has trimmed his hands to the shape of the job. The bucket rises, the lip shines, the rope squeaks where it runs. The well-keeper nods toward your skin as if permission were a measurable thing. You rinse the inside with a splash, never trust old water to welcome new, then fill it to a mark your fingers learn faster than your eyes. Too full and it will leak at the seam. Too light and you will hate yourself when the noon wind heats your tongue. You seal the stopper with a twist of fibre and a smear of pitch, then rub a line of oil across the seam because pitch cracks at the wrong kind of noon. Now the boring, beautiful part, balancing loads. Each camel carries 2 bales hung from a wooden bar. Each pair must weigh within a handful, or the saddle will bite, and a bitten camel is a teacher you do not want. In a corner of the yard sits a scale, a beam with a tongue that finds level like a little god who prefers fairness to speed. The scale's pans shine with old ware. The nested weights are stored in a cloth sack like an old family of coins. You lift a bale, the hemp biting your palms, and the man at the scale grunts approval if the tongue settles true. A scribble on a wooden tally records the number, one more dull mark in a travelling book of promises. If the weights match, the day will too. You look inside bales that aren't yours to learn by watching. The goods are a quiet catalogue of the road's appetite. Rolls of silk wrapped in paper and twine, felt, dyed wool, bricks of tea pressed hard like book pages, cones of sugar like little towers, sacks of pepper and cinnamon hidden under humbler things, glass beads, a small chest of coins that smells of copper and old hands, a bundle of paper and a sheaf of sealed letters, because merchants send words as well as cloth. Nothing flashy rides on the top layer. The flashy things are nestled where curious fingers cannot reach without showing their intent. Camels grumble when the pads go on. You learn the saddle ritual. Felt blanket first, smoothed with the flat of your hand. The wooden frame hoisted by 2 people, not one. The breastband set with care so it won't rub. The tail strap adjusted so it does not shame the animal. You check the girth, not by trusting your eyes, but by tucking your fingers under and feeling whether skin and leather greet each other with a truce or a grudge. A man runs a salve along a patch of skin as bier, own and tender as a baked fig. He grunts, not to you, but to the day. We will not start a wound we will have to carry. In the corner of the yard, the caravan head, call him the caravan bashi, call him the caravansala, checks his papers. They are not yours and never will be, unless you buy your way into years of small, boring victories. He has route permits stamped by someone in a gatehouse who likes to keep his ink fresh. Letters of passage from a city magistrate who prefers caravans to bandits. Tax receipts that carry the smell of a man who makes receipts in a room without windows. He has a list of wells and a list of debts and a list of names that can have your goods looked at and not looked at, depending on the week. Breakfast is not a meal. It is a stack of things that don't spoil. Flatbread that breaks into quiet shards. Dry curds you soften in your cheek like a sailor. Dates that put a hand on your blood when the cold leaves early and the heat arrives late. A pinch of salt you tuck against your tongue so the water you carry will stay with you and not bail out at the first good sweat. You smear fat on your feet and pull on socks. You wrap your head not like a hero, but like a person who understands wind. The scarf is not a banner, it is a filter. It will keep dust from making stones where your lungs should be. You are almost ready, so someone gives you a job. On the road, usefulness is the only polite way to be present. You count animals. Always count. A string of 10, a string of 8, a mare and foal roped to the back of a cart, 2 donkeys, 4 guards' horses, a mule with a fondness for the corner of your sleeve. You count again because the bell on the lead camel seduces people into trusting sound over number. Bells wander, numbers don't. The gate creaks open. The yard exhales. The road recognizes your feet the way old floors recognize old boots. The first hour is practice. People find their place. The bell's voice spreads a calm that is part signal, part lullaby. The outriders melt into the scrub to make sure news finds the caravan before the caravan finds. Trouble. You become good at boring skills, keeping a pace that doesn't brag, noticing which camel favours which foot, feeling when the sun cheats 1 degree higher and promises to do it again. You will not last a day, not because you are weak, but because the road asks for 1,000 small obediences and punishes the one you forget. You stop to adjust your sandal and discover later that a stone walked into your heel where the leather bent. Now you limp for 3 hours because fashioning a bandage on the move is not a talent, it is a curse. You sip too early and then hold your water too long. Your kidneys scold you with a dull note that accompanies the bell. You forget to check the knot you set on your water skin. You learn how long it takes for a drip to turn into a waste you can measure in thirst. Mid-morning arrives with the first paperwork of the day. A gatehouse at the edge of a walled town, whitewash peeling. A soldier whose boredom is a weapon. He holds a board with lines cut by a man who liked straight things. He counts animals. He looks at the caravan head's papers under a shade his friend built by stacking old tools and a beam. He touches the paper, not with respect, but with the humility of someone whose job depends on other people believing that lines on a page can make dust behave. Money moves, sometimes coins from a jar, sometimes a promise sealed with a stamp, sometimes a polite gift of something that smells like cinnamon and tastes like politics. Your goods are not really inspected, your faces are. The soldier decides whether your day is about to shorten or lengthen. Today he lets it lengthen. The bell resumes. The heat does not arrive like a shout. It arranges the air out of your reach. Shadows grow blunt. Leather warms to a temperature your fingers mark and then forget. Your scarf becomes a place you visit when air is a stranger. If the route cuts across, a salt flat, light and ground, join hands and taunt your depth perception. You walk closer to the bell. It becomes your horizon. On the right, low beacon towers stand like blunt pencils, their tops blackened by old burnings. A watchman sits with his knees high, his job a string stretched too tight across too many days. Watch, light, wait, sleep, repeat. The tower tells you nothing today, which is its success. No smoke in the notch means no raid on the plain. To the left, an irrigation ditch glints and then disappears. A rumour of water that belongs to someone else's noon. The caravan stops at a midday shelter. Not a town exactly, but a walled square the size of Patience. Inside there is shade and a rectangle of packed earth where animals can fold their legs and let their bellies help with the bored work of breathing. A trough gleams with the group's first math problem. How much water does a day permit, and who measures it so that arguments end before voices rise? The caravan head chooses a man with a face that says no in a way that makes people hear thank you. You wet a cloth and put it around your neck. You stare at the well and do not ask for more. You learn to rest as if it were work. Someone tells you the rules that nobody writes. Don't show hunger for coin. Hunger makes wolves circular. Don't jump a place in line. It is not about the line. It is about the story people tell about you later when your goods go missing. Don't touch someone else's load unless you ask. Loads are marriages between people and their promises. Don't talk much to the boy with the quick eyes and the pretty knife. He has an uncle with a horse you will meet by moonlight if he decides the bell's voice is worth owning. You check your feet. The road has already begun to eat them. You smooth a layer of tallow over the sore spot and press your sock into it so the cloth and fat marry. You stretch your toes because a cramped foot makes your next hour longer than your last. You learn to look at the path as if it were language. A dot of stone here means the cartwheel will swerve there. A dark patch means damp, which means better footing. A line of black beetles means dried dung, which means the last caravan chose this exact line, which means the ground trusts it. In the afternoon, the wind lifts a toy out of the dust and pretends it is a storm. The bell's voice goes away, and you look at angles instead, the slant of the man ahead's shoulders, the way the camel's tail scrawls the same letter again and again on the air. Someone calls to wrap your face and kneel if the wind proves serious. Today it does not. It is only rude. You tie your scarf tighter and keep your mouth small. You will meet languages today. A Sogdian merchant wears rings brighter than his smile. A Turkic drover whistles commands instead of speaking them. A Chinese clerk travelling with a crate of paper nods at your greeting and then rearranges his robe as if language were a folding cloth. A monk from a cave temple offers a bowl of water and a few words about a virtue that sounds like patience. You learn 4 useful phrases that sound the same in every language. How much, which way, how far, and thank you. You do not pretend to belong. You pretend to be grateful, which works better. Money appears as if shy. Round bronze coins with square holes ride on a cord like beads and pay for small things without fuss. Silver drachms stamped with faces and fires pay for larger ones, weighed on a scale because strangers prefer weight to faces. You learn to bring your own weights because you trust your own brass to tell the truth better than the weights of a man who sells those weights. You watch how the caravan head pays in gifts where money would be crude. A slice of sugar to a gate guard, a roll of thin paper to a monk, a pretty bead to a boy who brings news faster than your outrider because his feet know Ali's horses hate. Late afternoon wrinkles the air and a cuff of hills cuts the light into peace. The road rises toward a pass where the wind never forgets to show up. The animals slow without being asked. The drovers' voices go lower because the air is thinner and speech rises and vanishes. Like smoke at altitude, here the road teaches a lesson people prefer not to learn. Breath is a coin you can spend only so fast. You walk slower than your pride likes. You let pride go first. You follow later. At the crest you see the next quarter day of your life, a smear of track disappearing into the kind of distance that makes hope both useful and silly. The light is flatter there. You pull your scarf down for one deep breath and smell everything at once. Old wool, camel, leather, iron, the tiny sweetness of someone's last fig, a trace of smoke that does not belong to you. You memorize that smell because you do not yet know that tomorrow's will be the same. You descend to a night stop, a caravanserai that looks like the last one and will look like the next. It is the repetition that saves you. You know where to tie the led camel. You know where the cook fire will claim a corner. You know the room where you can spread a mat and call it a bed if a family hasn't claimed it already. Someone sells bowls of lentils. Someone sells a promise of mutton and delivers a story about why there is no mutton tonight. You accept the lentils. You keep your spoon. You share your salt. You stop thinking about pepper because pepper is an idea for markets, not for courtyards where meals are honest. The animal care that looked like a chore in the morning now looks like mercy. You check girths, you remove the frame, you dice a wad of felt and rub it across a pad to pull up grit that would work its way into a saw if left until morning. You find a small cut under the strap and call the boy with the copper bowl. He brings a smear of grease and a poultice that smells like the inside of a jar that has seen 3 lives. You tie the nose rope to a ring in the wall in a knot that remembers you so you can untie it in the dark. You stroke the animal's neck in the place where even the proudest came. It stops pretending it doesn't like you. When night finally admits itself, the courtyard becomes a language of low voices. Deals are made in a tone that cannot be taken to court. News is traded for news. A woman shows a bracelet to a man with eyes that count. The bracelet disappears into a sleeve. A roll of paper appears as if it had always been there. A guard cleans his bowstring and pretends not to notice. A monk blesses the well and pretends to bless everyone who drinks from it. Someone points up and names a star that will be your guide if you must walk at night because the next well lies closer to midnight than to dawn. You think the day is finished when a rider arrives at the gate without knocking. He carries a word instead of a package. The low route ahead is closed by a toll no one paid yesterday and no one intends to pay tomorrow. A taxman's nephew needs a wedding. The road is his purse until it is full. The caravan head does not sigh. He listens. He tips the messenger a shape of silver that weighs less than the problem and more than the dust. Then he does the most important work of the day. He decides. Take the salt flats and risk a long stretch between wells, or wait tomorrow and pay a toll that will grow richer when it sees patience. Cut a new line that steals a half day and pays it back in blisters, or trust that the gate will tire of its own appetite. You are not asked because you have nothing to pledge but your feet. You lie on your mat and stare at a ceiling that remembers soot in a language older than paint. The bell that led you to the morning hangs silent on a peg. Your skin hums with the memory of its voice. You press your tongue to your teeth and taste the day's dust. If you sleep, you will dream of distance wearing a face, and if you wake, you will watch stars like nails hammered into a lid you cannot open from inside. Breathe in, 1, 2, breath. The out, 1, 2. The caravan's calm is something you can almost touch. Animals breathing in a low chord, people murmuring toward quiet, a well that does not judge the hands that draw it. But the day is not done until the leader speaks, and he has not. So you lie there and learn the last rule that nobody writes. The Silk Road runs on decisions made by tired people at the edge of light. And you ask yourself, softer than your own breath, if the low route is barred and the high wind is picking up, which risk belongs to you? Thirst tomorrow or anger tonight? And do you have the sense to follow a bell you cannot yet hear? Breathe in. 1, 2. Breathe out. 1, 2. You left section 1 on your mat, listening for a leader's choice. Pay the toll on the low route tonight, or take the high wind tomorrow. The decision arrives the way good decisions do, quietly, as if it were always in the room. The caravan bashi speaks to the guards first, then to the drovers, then to the clerk who keeps papers in a sleeve sealed with wax that smells faintly of honey. The word passes down the line. We climb, not because pride prefers hills, but because thirst is a worse master than wind, and because a toll that grows fat on patience will be fatter tomorrow. The bell is rehung. The courtyard exhales. You wrap your scarf and make a promise to your feet. The gate opens to air that nips instead of smothers. You move out with the long, dull grace of a column that has decided to be one creature. The first hour is always a test. The animal that hated yesterday's strap hates it again. The bale who's not looked honest has second thoughts. Someone remembers a wool hood left on a peg and swallows the memory, because turning back for a hood is how a day becomes two. You learn how a caravan solves its problems, slowly. A drover eases a strap with a bit of felt. A boy rejigs a knot and spits on it for luck, because spittle is the oldest glue. The line never stops entirely. It shortens and lengthens like breath. You take the high route toward a pass, with a name that means nothing to you, and everything to lock. As on the map, in some city man's office it might be a tidy zigzag. Under your soles it is a stair whose steps are bigger than your mood. The Bactrian camels handle it with a bored strength that makes you feel complicated and delicate. 2 humps shift under the saddles like boats tied to a dock. Their wide, splayed feet press stones into the path as if the stones had asked to be arranged. By mid-morning, the paperwork arrives in a new shape. A fortified post guards the approach to the pass, less grand than a city gate and more serious than a shepherd's hut. A post commander in a coat trimmed with wool steps out and rubs a thumb along his lip while he reads the caravan's letters. Stamps appear, inked squares, circles with tiny writing, the faint bite of an impressed seal on dark paper. Your leader shows what he must show, and nothing else. He has redundant proofs, one from the town behind you, one from a governor whose nephew once crossed these hills with a pack of sugar, and a third from a temple trust that gave him a loan in exchange for the promise of a safe delivery of paper and oil. If one letter is denied, another is offered. On these roads, backup is not a luxury. It is the difference between moving and explaining. The post commander does not look at you. He counts animals, mouths, guards bows, quivers and bales with a gaze that has no eyebrows in it. He asks your leader for the names of wells on the far side, a test to see whether this caravan has eyes farther than its nose. The leader answers without style, the way a cook names herbs. Well at the cedar stub, well with the rope scar on the rim, well that tastes of iron, well with the echo. The commander's lips relax a degree. He stamps the pass letter and returns it with the grip of a man who likes paper, mostly for how it calms people. He takes a fee, not a bribe if you say the word custom, and the line moves. Imbing has its own etiquette. You keep intervals so a stumble doesn't multiply. You don't stand where stones want to roll. You breathe through your nose and count 10 steps, then 10 more, then treat. 30, like a feast. The air drains colour from everything. Even noise looks grey. A guard points out a waymark, a stack of stones with a shard of black pottery wedged at an angle, which tells the next traveller that the ground ahead holds firm after rain. You add a pebble as you pass, because small contributions are the tolls you pay to good luck. At the crest, a signal tower smoulders from an earlier warning you did not need. A watchman in a felt cap tends the last orange in a bowl of ash. He nods at the caravan as if he recognises it from last year, which he does, because the road has a memory longer than anyone's name day. He asks nothing. Your leader gives him a fist of dried apricots anyway. Exchanges like that turn into insurance, not a policy in a chest, just a man at a tower who will choose to keep a signal low if he knows your bell and how you behave. On the far side, you enter a region that lives off the caravan the way bees live off a field. Gently, insistently, without apology. A road tax officer sits beneath a scrap of shade and counts shadows as they pass. He notes tally marks on a wood board smoothed by years of fingering. He will present those marks to a clerk in a town with a door that squeaks at shoulder height. The clerk will weigh them against the stack of receipts your leader keeps in a pouch and a measure of coin that clinks exactly once when laid on a tray. The sums never match perfectly. The difference is the price of being mortal. Your leader pays what brings silence, not justice. By noon you have the low wind in your scarf and a taste of metal in your mouth that means you have climbed above what your body remembers from the flat. The caravan stops at a windbreak, a line of stones dragged here by people whose names no tablet kept. Drovers kneel to the leeward side. Fires spark in pans raised on 3 stones. You learn to love boiled things. Tea if you're... Root grazes Chinese influence. Salty milk if it leans stepward. Barley gruel everywhere. Someone tells you to sprinkle a pinch of salt on your tongue before you drink. It keeps water from running through you like a rumour. The afternoon is a lesson in specialisation. In the column you can pick out trades by their habits. Sogdian merchants, rings, beards trimmed with old pride. A language that turns trade into poetry. Count by finger joints, not just coins. A Persian scribe rides with packets of suftaja, letters of payment that let coins stay safe in one city, while value travels as writing to another. A Chinese clerk hums to himself and checks a roll of paper with a seal that carries the name of his office in square characters. He calls it fei qian, flying cash, because it moves faster than animals when other clerks agree to honour it. None of this makes the road shorter. It makes it safer, which is a different arithmetic. You see how religion behaves on the road, politely, like neighbours who borrow sugar. A monk in patched saffron carries a bowl of beads and a scrap of script that glows like water when tilted. A Muslim guard lays his mat at an angle that has nothing to do with the pass and everything to do with Mecca. A Zoroastrian trader mutters a prayer about fire and conscience under his breath while he lights a twig bundle for the kettle. At the next oasis, someone will leave a coin at a shrine carved in a cave wall. Someone else will hang a rag on a tree. Someone else will wash hands before bread. The road has room for all of it because wash basins and rules for sharing a well matter more than arguments at altitude. Evening brings you to an oasis town that knows exactly what caravans need and exactly how much to charge. The outer wall is mud brick, dressed in white, catching a rose colour that makes travellers think generous thoughts for 10 minutes. Inside the gate, street. T's turn narrow on purpose, so carts slow to a speed that allows selling. Water sellers sing the price as if it were a prayer. A boy offers nails. Yes, nails. And you realise nails are a currency when wood splits and somebody's frame loses a friend. A smith hammers a strap rivet flat while you watch. 3 taps, a plunge into a pot of black water, a shake. He is not hurried. Haste is how metal forgets its manners. Your leader heads straight for the customs house, a low room with a clerk who has mastered the art of looking tired without ever losing count. On the wall hangs a board with rates burned into it, wool by the bale, silk by the roll, tea by the brick, spice by the pinch, glass by the bead, paper by the bundle. The board is older than the clerk. New rulers scratch new marks on it. Old marks remain beneath, ghostly. Your goods are sampled, a cord cut, a roll unwrapped, a brick weighed. The clerk presses a stamp into wax on your paper. The stamp's face carries the town's little lion, and the wax picks up dust immediately, as if to remind you that dignity and dirt are married here. You watch the exchange rates like weather. Chinese cash with square holes pays for lodgings and lamp oil in 1 quarter. Sasanian-style silver drachms, faces rubbed into ovals, speak louder 2 towns west. Abbasid dirhams with clean Arabic script widen eyes further still. In a market at the far edge of the steppe, you might see one of those same dirhams again in a Viking horde you will never visit. Weight wins where faces argue. A scale decides. Night in an oasis is a relief you can count in your back. You sleep on a platform over a stable where the animal heat climbs through the boards like a second blanket. The caravan's papers rest under your leader's head, wrapped in a leather folio and tucked against the wall. Guards take turns on the roof, not for romance, but because news often rides at night when the air carries sound farther. A tax remission, a band at the toll, a bridge washed out, a governor replaced. You learn to wake when footsteps argue with the hour. Morning pulls you along. The desert rim where sand makes old decisions look new. Here the wells are everything. They are named like relatives. Bitter sister, sweet uncle, cracked cousin, the silent one. A canat line, an underground channel from slope to plain, dents the surface at regular intervals, each dent a maintenance shaft capped with a lid you are not allowed to move. A farmer's boy walks the line with a pole, tapping lids and listening for the timbre that tells him whether water moves beneath or sulks. When a canat fails, fields fail. Towns treat the men who keep them like priors treat relic guardians, not famous, but fed. The day's boring triumphs stack up. A mule's shoe loosens. The smith with travelling tools punches out a nail and drives a new one. A bale's seam splits. A woman with a belt knife and good eyes threads needle through cord with a stitch that looks like nothing and lasts like a vow. A water skin leaks. A boy wipes it dry, warms pitch, smears, cools, tests with a breath. None of this makes a story, and all of it makes a safe arrival. You notice the map in people's heads. A drover can tell you where the wind will push in the third hour after the sun clears a certain notch. A trader knows which gateguard likes sugar and which likes compliments about his horse. A monk points you to a cave wall where travellers have scratched names in 3 scripts for 100 years. The names fade, the habit endures. A woman selling dates at a stall calls you friend in a language you don't know and means customer, which is close enough to keep the road polite. At a relay house outside town, part in, part post, the clerk uses a copper bowl to keep accounts. He fills it with water and drops in pebbles. 1 pebble for each bale unloaded to his courtyard, another for each animal stabled, larger stones for private rooms, a thin stone for use of the well. At day's end he counts by removal, EMPEP, tying the bowl pebble by pebble into a jar and calling out categories to a boy who marks lines on a tablet. The method is foolproof to anyone who doesn't tip the bowl. The bowl sits behind a low wall. No one tips it. Everyone has to live here again next month. You learn a rule whispered by people who like rules. Don't be first and don't be last. The first caravan through after a new governor arrives pays high because the clerk wants to set an example. The last caravan before the snows pays high because the clerk wants to make up what he failed to squeeze earlier. Middle is mercy. Middle lets you watch a man test a rope across a flood and decide whether your animals can risk it. Middle lets you buy herbs before the crowd notices the cough. Middle keeps your face unremarked, which is the right price for safety. In the Taklamakan's skirt, the sand decides to remind you who names things. The wind lets go of a handful of grit, then a basket, then a room. The bell's voice goes thin. The lead camel lowers its head and shows you what to do. You wrap your scarf to your eyes, tuck in an edge, kneel by your load, and turn your back to let the grain rain pass over you. A guard lays himself over a bale to smooth its top. The smoother it is, the less the wind eats it. When the blast calms, you stand and shake out the world. Nothing dramatic, no heroics, just waiting correctly. 2 days later, the road bends into green like a promise fulfilled. A river braided with light feeds orchards that smell like sugar even before fruit appears. This is a town that knows textiles. Spindles click everywhere. And paper. Sheets hang like flags in courtyards. The pulp stirred with sticks worn smooth by years. You buy a roll because paper is lighter than memory and takes ink more politely. A Chinese clerk shows you how to seal it with paste and a thumb. Your leader stores contracts in the roll, safer here than in a tin that invites hands. You see the Sogdian Quarter, a lane where houses carry painted lintels, where ledgers are kept in bags that make a leather rustle, where letters travel faster than Nimals, because the people know the people down the line. A Sogdian host puts you in a courtyard with a fig tree. He gives you news as if it were fruit, freely and with an eye for which pieces will sweeten which throats. A toll has dropped on the west road. A bridge has lost its patience on the south. A governor's mother has died, which moves schedules like a hand moves chess pieces. You pay him back by buying nothing you didn't need, which is a social art as old as trade. The law notices you again. A magistrate's man inspects scales in the market. He brings his own brass weights and sets them on trays with a thud that makes everyone think about fairness. A merchant smiles the way a man smiles when he knows his scale is honest this week. Fines are posted on a board in chalk. Rain will erase them next month, and a different hand will write different numbers. The caravan bashi reads them with a squint that has never lost him a coin he could keep. You spend a day doing the boring glory of caravan life. Mending, bathing, repacking. A bathhouse takes your dust and returns you to yourself in a room that whispers and steams. Men share trays of bread and ask each other for price memory. Wool in the west, pepper in the east, tea bricks up or down. You listen and add none of your own wisdom because you don't have any yet. You count straps on your bundle, you rub oil into your boots. You buy a new needle because the old one bent when you asked it to be a nail. At sunset, your leader lays out the next leg on the dirt with a stick. Markers, wells, tolls that can be smiled through, one ugly stretch where a stone slope falls into a broken bridge and the detour costs a half day and a few nerves. He assigns watches for the next 2 nights because news says a small band, not armies, just men who prefer other people's decisions to their own work, has been circling the low road. He shifts the order of march so that the slowest ride nearer the bell and the strongest guards shadow the edge where Scrub could hide a plan. Nothing flashy, no speeches. He just rearranges probabilities. You lie under a roof beam and feel, for a moment, that you might actually last a day. Then the clerk comes with a problem folded into polite words. The customs house has stamped your papers for transit to the next prefecture, but not through it. A scribal habit can stop a road. Your leader weighs options. Turn back 3 hours for a correct mark, risk a fine on the far side that could become a confiscation, or buy a guarantee now from a man who sells clean stamps the way a cobbler sells laces. Useful, morally grey and not always strong. He looks at the sky, which shows nothing, and at the water chart, which shows a long gap ahead if you delay. He looks at you the way a road looks at a new traveller. It does not care, but it will remember whether you learn. The courtyard wind nudges the fig leaves. A camel coughs like a drum with a blanket over it. The bell hangs argued and silent. The clerk waits with his brush. The sun drops a hand lower and takes comfort with it. You realise again that the Silk Road is a paper road as much as a dust one. Stamps, seals, letters of payment, written permissions that move coin without showing it, notes on wells and wind and watch rotations. You can carry bales like a hero and still be stopped by one missing square of ink. Breathe in. 1, 2. Breathe out. 1, 2. The leader traces 2 lines in the dust. One that loops back to the customs bench, and one that runs forward to the prefecture border where a bored officer could become a hungry one. He taps the forward line with his stick and looks at the clerk, who lifts the brush as if he were about to write sense into the world. The brush hovers, the air waits. Do you turn back for a correct stamp and lose a day's water and favour, or do you gamble on a friendly border and risk paying with coin you can't spare, and in a place where, if the officer is angry, coin may not be enough? Breathe in. 1, 2. Breathe out. 1, 2. You left section 2 staring at a problem the road loves. A missing stamp that weighs more than a bale. The courtyard was kind. The fig leaves clattered like small coins. The clerk's brush hovered over a page that decided whether your goods were moving or posing. You slept on a roof under stars that looked owned by no one and woke to the most ordinary resolution. You buy time. The caravanbashi does not choose the expensive return or the dangerous gamble. He chooses a thread between, an interim chit, sold by a man everyone pretends not to know. It is a voucher with the right seal and the right wording, stamped on paper that smells faintly of rice paste and lamp smoke. It will pass at the prefectural border if the officer there wants to wave you through. It will fail if he wants a story. The price is not coin alone. It is also a promise to carry a small packet of letters to a cousin in the next town. The leader pays both prices because the road is a market for leniencies as much as spices. Dawn drains across the courtyard and fills the gate. You go out with the bell steady as a metronome. The first miles are the careful sort. People check knots without admitting they are checking. The pack saddles breathe and settle. The loads sigh into their straps. Dust floats like powdered glass. You taste stale tea on your tongue and welcome it because it means you stored water under a different name. The prefectural boundary arrives without drama. A low wall, a shade awning, a table, 2 stools, and 1 officer with the posture of a bored cat. He looks at your leader the way cats look at bowls, assessing volume and intent. Papers bloom on the table, the real pass, the old receipts, the interim chit with its fresh wax. The officer touches seals with a fingernail, a gesture that says I have seen seal forgers, and I am not sentimental. He asks for Thor. He thinks a clerk who lives on the road expects to hear the next well's depth this month, the number of animals lame in the last week, the name of the tax farmer at the town behind you, your leader, answers without embroidery. Then the officer asks for something that is not knowledge at all, a patience toll. This is the amount a day is worth when it is yours to release. Your leader pays in weight, not faces, and the officer's boredom relaxes. He stamps the pass in the right place with a stamp that has seen more dust than ink and hands it back with a decent grip. The chit disappears into a stack under a stone. Your papers become correct by absorbing themselves into a larger pile of correctness. You learn what merchants learn. Arrival is a mosaic of small permissions. You move on, and the landscape changes from polite orchards to scrub that holds its water like a secret. The air is wider, the sound larger and emptier. A herd of onagers stands on the horizon and then decides you are not interesting. Wind trolls the folds of your scarf and finds a gap. You tuck it tight and swallow less road. The well chart says bitter sister, then cracked cousin, then nothing for half a day. The boy who notes animals at morning and night starts adding the mood of each camel because camels' tempers are better weather than the sky. Merope, you did not know camels carried star names, tosses her head at noon. Alcyone walks with a resolve that suggests a sore strap. Electra stares at the horizon as if someone owes her an apology. Midday brings a false oasis, a shimmer that drifts just out of reach like a rumour that refuses to be pinned. You do not chase it because you were taught by the road, and the road dislikes gullible feet. The real oasis announces itself in practical ways. A thicker line of poplars, the drone of insects that only sing around assured water, a thin dot of smoke that climbs and then lives quiet at a certain height because cook fires reach a different ceiling than signal fires. You go where the insects and fires agree. This oasis is a string, 3 small pools rather than one, fed by a shallow kanat that forgets to be generous after the 3rd dry month. There is a keeper, as there always is, a woman with a ledge of ledgers in her mind. She stares at your animals first and your faces later. She nods toward the first pool for filling, the second for washing, the third for resting animals to their knees. She points with a ladle at a sign everyone understands, no leather in the drinking place. Your leader pays a water fee, measured not in coin but in turns. Your strings time at the lip before you yield to the next string. A boy holds a pot. He counts breaths because counting drops starts fights. You learn how to wash without waste. A damp cloth wiped twice, a cup poured once, a last half cup on the neck where heat collects like bad news. You kneel beside a camel and sponge the pad where grit collects under callus. The animal rolls its jaw, forgiving you for earlier mistakes. You watch a drover fix a saw, pulling hair from the strap hole, widening the slit, rubbing grease into the leather so it slides like good manners instead of chewing like gossip. Every correction is small. All of them prevent the kind of problem that becomes a legend before noon. When the sun begins its slant, the caravan is smaller by 2. A pair of traders peel off toward a side valley with mules and a box of glass beads. They take a runner, a boy who can cover 4 miles faster than a horse if you pay him with fruit now and a coin later. He will return with news about the side routes' fees and teeth, meaning men with poor dentistry and good bows. Your leader marks a line in the dust with his stick, a gesture that sends 2 packs worth of risk in one direction and keeps the rest in another. The Silk Road is many roads pretending to be one. Toward evening, the breeze gains gossip. Talk of bandits to the west, not armies, just a small band who prefer other people's prose. Affections. The guards pass the word without sharpening their voices. You do not rehearse heroics. You rearrange probabilities. Loads are shifted. The least tempting bales go outermost. The pretty. Chest sits in the middle under a dull blanket. The clerk's paper roll moves from his sleeve to the camel with the face that bites strangers. Outriders drift slightly wider, not to be bold, only to make news arrive 10 heartbeats sooner if it must. Night reaches for the road with long arms. The caravanserai is still an hour away when a rider pelts in from the north, horse's sides quoting fear. He leans low and talks to your leader as if telling him a recipe. 6 men, 2 bows, 1 spear, 1 boy with eyes like a magpie. They set up where the path pinches between 2 low rises. They like coins, not letters of payment, because letters cannot be eaten, and coins are a language that needs no translator. Your leader listens and changes the tempo of the line. You take down lamps. The bell is muffled with a twist of cloth. The strongest animals move forward. The fragile loads tighten their straps 1 more hole. No one says the word ambush. The road has its own vocabulary for bad editing, the sudden cut in which a day's sequence is reordered by strangers. You reach the pinch at the hour when the sky has colour and the earth has none. A stone clicks. A voice asks for taxes due to a master whose name changes weekly. Your leader uses the only defence that works when numbers are not in your favour, the price of boredom. He talks in long, precise sentences about tithes already paid at the last gate, of how the tax farmer this month prefers letters to coin, and how the magistrate's nephew will not be pleased if receipts bear the wrong mark. He brings out a tin badge stamped with an emblem borrowed, without theft, you note, from a town you just left, the kind of badge a petty collector might wear to look official. He does not claim it is authority. He lets it sit on the table of the moment like a light coin that tips the scale. The men with bows look at each other and see their night turn into paperwork. Behind you, a guard coughs in the language of too many guards for too little gain. Someone mutters a number. Your leader answers with a smaller number and a bale of cloth with the dullest colour you have ever seen. It is not really dull, it is cleverly dyed to look like nothing. The boy with the magpie eyes looks disappointed. The man with the spear feels the air changing and chooses to accept the invented office of border maintenance. The caravan slides through the pinch. Coins stay mostly at home. Pride arrives uninjured because it did not attend. At the next caravanserai, lamps wake like a city of bees. The gatekeeper hears the bell, hears the breath of animals, hears the thin harp string in your leader's voice, and moves briskly. The yard offers arrangements practiced for centuries. Animals inward, people outward, fires in the corners that belong to heat but not to smoke, water pulled in a line that respects turn. You pass around bowls that taste of lentils and survival. The guards take a roof corner each. Their shadows lean past the parapet and onto a yard where a mule refuses to sleep. On your mat, you watch your hands remember the day, the strap you tightened correctly, the knot you misjudged, the sip you delayed and then earned back. You sleep in the old way, by pieces. Morning gives you the sense that risk and relief are cousins who never leave the party at the same time. The road turns east to a river whose bridge has a memory of itself but prefers not to honour it. Its arches are shy of the bank by one span because a flood last spring ate the shore and forgot to put it back. The local rule is to ferry bales across on rafts made of skins blown full and lashed under a platform of hurdles. Animals swim with ropes looped to their halters, and a boy on the bank who understands rope like a second spine. It is dull and complicated and sometimes dangerous, which is what the road calls Tuesday. You help where you can without becoming a person other people must rescue. You carry hurdles, you stamp reeds into bundles, you wrap your scarf tight, and tie the light rope as you were taught. Bowline, quick, not a tangle, a knot that remembers your intention even when water does not. The first raft goes with a squeal of leather against wet wood and a push from 10 hands. Bales sway but do not roll. On the far side, boys pull by a line that sings, low, steady, a note that tells you the current and the effort agree. Camels grunt through foam. The drover with the good voice hums under his breath, a pitch that matches the line so the animals hear persistence, not panic. All across, a man keeps count in a monotone, counting not just animals, but consequences. In the town beyond, refreshment feels like a joke that finally lands. You find a bathhouse with walls the colour of bread and a floor cool enough to make you polite. The attendant hands you a bowl and does not ask questions you cannot afford to answer. You scrub dust from places that had begun to think dust was their new name. You sit in steam that wraps your lungs in attention. The room smells of soap that was ash and oil an hour ago. You listen to other travellers swap prices in a tone that assumes prices are stories, not facts. Pepper up here, silk firm there, paper steady if you seal it properly and store it like a child. You say little. Your knowledge is new and fragile. The best thing you can do for it is let it get bigger in your head before you test it on someone else's ears. Your goods meet their destination the way the road likes most. Not with trumpets, with piles. A warehouse clerk measures a corner on a floor with stones set at the cardinal directions. He likes right angles and makes your bales obey them. He scratches your leader's name on a board and hangs it by a peg because hanging is less temporary than laying and less permanent than carving. He opens a ledger whose pages smell like flour and old sun and writes the goods and their conditions in a hand. That will be vanity in 2 centuries and gold next week when a dispute needs memory. He offers tea the colour of patience. Your leader answers with paper, not coin. Letters of payment drawn on a house 3 towns away that trusts this one to behave. Everyone prefers paper when distance is safer than weight. If you expected celebration, the warehouse disappoints you on purpose. Arrival is a place of caution. Goods must rest and be counted before you talk of what you have earned. Animals must be rubbed to keep sores from becoming speeches. People must sleep in a room with shutters that close so breath does not wander. You spend a day in the best kind of boredom, mending straps that did not fail, checking loads that will not move for a week, polishing a buckle that is really gratitude in metal. You walk to the market and buy a small spoon carved from horn, not because you need it, but because your hand wanted to own something that is not a rope. That evening, the caravan bashi pays debts. The smith gets coin. The waterkeeper gets cloth. The boy who ran part of a day gets a coin he will sew into his cap so he remembers the plan he has for it. A monk receives a donation for the shrine. A watchman gets a packet of tea he will never drink because he prefers to sell it to a tea drinker for a pair of socks his wife admires. The road's ethics are simple. Pay people so that when you return, the path into town is not an argument. You cannot buy luck, you can rent welcome. In the morning, the Sogdian quarter's doors crack open like careful smiles. Your leader sits in a courtyard under a mulberry and signs 2 contracts. One to sell half the load locally at a price that looks modest now and generous later, and another to carry letters and light parcels into the next prefecture for a fee that will feed the animals and your crew. This is the quiet climax of trade, not the buying, not the hauling, but the turning. Goods becoming coin, coin becoming paper, paper becoming further goods, and the circle recommencing with more knowledge tucked into the rim. You stand on the roof last night before the next leg and feel a breeze that smells like fruit skin. You try to add the day up and discover the road uses a math you do not yet own. Profit is certainly part of it, but so are seals correctly placed, knots that untie easily after long hours, wells managed fairly by strangers, sleep that chooses your map because you did not lie today, animals that forgive your ignorance because you learned before their skin did, taxes paid to people who make themselves the border, and words carried farther than bales ever go. The sum is not a number, it is a state. You arrived and can leave again. You would not last a day. This remains true, because a day on this road is not one thing. It is a stack of small obediences, any one of which can slip and take the rest with it. It is the ability to hold water in your mind, how much you have, how much you'll need, how much you can spare when impatience rings like a bell in your throat. It is the habit of watching edges, strap against skin, paper against seal, coin against scale, person against roll, and defending those edges with routine rather than speeches. It is the courtesy of middle pace, not first, not last, present and unremarked. Now turn your ear toward your own age. You live in a world of container ships and air freight, of barcodes and servers, of cranes that lift a bale the size of a house. Yet your packages still move only when stamps meet stamps, when a form's square is inked where it should be, when a clerk at a border decides your papers feel like somebody's responsibility. Your water is fuel, your bell is tracking data, your caravan bashi is a person with a screen who worries about customs holds and port fees and letters of credit rather than suffrages and chits. The road is faster now, wider, lit at night, but it remains a paper road and it still runs on habits the dull call boring and merchants call wise. Breathe in. 1, 2... Breathe out. 1, 2. The bell you followed all day is quiet on its peg, and the yard below your roof is arranged as if a hand that loves pattern laid it out. Animals inward, people outward, fires in the corners, water in the centre where bargaining ends. You feel the calm of a finished fraction, not whole, not final, but balanced. Somewhere another caravan sets out because another decision was made by a tired person at the edge of light. Somewhere, a clerk stamps a square that seems too small to matter and makes 50 lives move. As sleep comes, you let one question sit beside you like a cooled bowl of tea. If our modern roads still depend on the quiet mathematics of arrival, permissions, maintenance, fairness at the well, what would change in your own life if you learned to love the boring parts of movement as much as the destinations and applause?